Chapter 16-19. In midair, the Terra vein source split into two, flying in two different directions. Lian Jiufeng and Nie Tian each flew towards one half of the Terra source. Damn it! Luo Xian couldn't help but curse when she saw this. She was the person closest to the Terra source, but the tables had turned in the blink of an eye. She was going to end up empty-handed. How could she accept this? If I can't get it, then don't even think about getting it. Luo Xian looked back at Lian Jiufeng cold. Then, she stabbed out with her sword. She wasn't attacking Lian Jiufeng, but the other half of the Terra source. Boom! The sword whistled through the air like lightning and split the other half of the Terra source in two again. Luo Xian's eyes glittered as she blurred into motion. Like a meteor, she sped through the air and grabbed a clump of earthstring source. Lian Jiufeng reacted very quickly as well. He flew towards the other half of the Terra source and grasped it firmly in his hand. The moment the two of them obtained the Terra source, they immediately felt a vast amount of Mother Earth energy. The power was endless and unusually strong. They couldn't help but smile. On the other side, Nie Tian had also obtained the other half of the Terra source. His eyes trembled violently. Holding the Terra source in his hand made him feel like he was bursting with power. The feeling was very real. It was definitely not an illusion. Lian Jiufeng and Luo Xian stood in midair and stared at Nie Tian with cold eyes. They had obtained half of the Terra source, but Nie Tian had obtained the other half. It didn't look like it was a good deal for them. Nie Tian, Lian Jiufeng, we'll meet again. Luo Xian stood at the highest point. Her cold eyes flickered and the chill was extremely heavy. However, she did not stop at all. Her figure moved, and with the power of the 1,000 clouds boundary, she leaped up into the sky. Luo Xian wasn't very strong. Obtaining a quarter of the Terra source was enough for her. She didn't dare to linger. It was better to leave as soon as possible. Luo Xian's figure was like a bolt of lightning, leaving behind countless shadows in the void, and disappeared in an instant. Only then did Nie Tian realize that they were currently in a huge underground pit, and the sky was actually connected to the surface. Watching Luo Xian's disappearing silhouette, Nie Tian's lips curled into a faint smile. He didn't mind. Luo Xian's departure was not a bad thing for him. He was worried that Lian Jiufeng and Luo Xian would team up. What a vicious woman. Interesting. Lian Jiufeng looked at Luo Xian's back and laughed playfully. A hint of killing intent flashed through his eyes. He had once saved Luo Xian's life, but he didn't expect the latter to snatch something from him. Lian Jiufeng, Luo Xian has left. What about you? Nie Tian looked at Lian Jiufeng and asked in a cold voice. Lian Jiufeng glanced at Nie Tian, then at the nearby Yao Chen. After thinking for a moment, he said, Nie Tian, the game has just begun. We will meet again. After saying this, Lian Jiufeng didn't linger and left. Of course, Nie Tian wouldn't stop Lian Jiufeng from leaving. He knew that Lian Jiufeng was probably wary of him and Yao Chen working together. Lian Jiufeng was very strong. Even if he and Yao Chen worked together, they might not be able to stop him. It was better to let him leave. Phew! After confirming that Lian Jiufeng had truly left, Nie Tian let out a long sigh of relief. His expression relaxed a lot. At the side, Yao Chen also let out a long breath. His tense nerves relaxed a lot. Lord Yao Wang, let's split the earth vein source. Nie Tian looked at Yao Chen, thought for a moment, and said indifferently. He already knew that Yao Chen was Ming Hui's disciple. Moreover, Yao Chen had helped him a lot during this underground trip. It was only right that Yao Chen get half of the earth vein source. Nie Tian, I know what the earth vein source is. To Qin Lai's surprise, Yao Chen smiled bitterly and waved his hands. It's not something I can covet. To me, the earth vein source is a curse, not a blessing. You should keep it for yourself. Nie Tian was stunned. He didn't think that Yao Chen would say such a thing. The earth vein source was a part of the legendary earth vein, one of the 9 great origins. The power it contained was unimaginable. He didn't think that someone would reject it. This old man is a reasonable person. It was at this moment Fat Cat let out a strange laugh and said, "Nye Tian, don't force him if he doesn't want it." Nye Tian was stunned. Yao Chen's reaction was out of his expectations, making him feel a little embarrassed. Nye Tian, the earth string essence contains origin power. Ordinary people can only absorb a bit of it to improve their cultivation speed, but that's all. Seeing Nye Tian's embarrassment, little Fat Cat couldn't help but explain. Even if that Luo Xian obtained the earth vein source, she would only be able to absorb its energy. She wouldn't be able to absorb it, so it wouldn't be of much use to her. Even Lai Yen Jiufeng, who has the pulse of 3 lives, can't merge with the earth vein source. However, he probably has other uses for it. But you're different. You have demonic yuan. Demonic yuan can directly merge with origin energy. It's a waste to give the earth vein source to others. You must keep it for yourself. Fat Cat's words were resolute, leaving no room for argument. This. Nye Tian frowned and turned to look at Chen Wuqing and the others. These people had gone through life and death with him. If he were to take the earth vein source for himself, it wouldn't be right. Don't worry, I will give your friends something even better as compensation. I won't mistreat them. Little Fat Cat knew what Nye Tian was thinking and said confidently with a smile. Nye Tian nodded. Without hesitation, he put the earth vein source away. Nye Tian, the others have left. What about us? Yao Chen looked at Nye Tian and asked. Let's see if there's anything else around. Nye Tian thought for a moment and landed on the ground. Next, everyone carefully checked their surroundings. Apart from the empty palace, there was nothing else. Let's leave too. Nye Tian smiled bitterly. He had been hoping for something else, but it seemed that he was overthinking. They no longer hesitated and prepared to leave. With these words, Nye Tian and the others flew up into the sky. A moment later, they saw the sky above them clear. They had finally flown out of the underground. Returning to the outside world and seeing the bright sunlight, everyone felt refreshed. Their depressed mood was much better. Nye Tian stood in the air and looked down at the abyss passageway. He thought, this should be a passageway left behind by the person who built the underground palace. Lai Yen Jiufeng and Luo Xian both know of its existence. It'll be troublesome if they return. Below the abyss passageway was an immeasurable Mother Earth stone mine. These mines were also shocking treasures. Behind Luo Xian was Thousand Feathers Tower, and Lai Yen Jiufeng would definitely find an inescapable net. These two forces were very terrifying. It would be troublesome if their people came here. Don't worry, Nye Tian. After Lai Yen Jiufeng and Luo Xian leave, they won't be able to find this place again. At this time, Fat Cat laughed strangely and said very proudly, "Why?" Nye Tian was taken aback, confusion filling his face. "Look around and you'll know." Fat Cat laughed again. It was a very strange laugh. Chapter 1620. Midair, Nye Tian looked around. The scene that entered his eyes caused his expression to stiffen. High up in the sky, Nye Tian and the others were surrounded by towering cliffs. Right now, they were in the middle of a sea of clouds. At the peak of the mountain, the sea of clouds surged. It was as if they had arrived at the end of the sky. The others also reacted at this moment. They stared at the cliffs around them and froze on the spot. A long time later, Nye Tian finally reacted. His expression eased a little. He rose to a high altitude and looked down. To his surprise, all he could see were towering cliffs and mountains. They were like pillars that reached into the sky. "Fat, this place is like a maze. If we leave, it will not be easy to find our way back." Nye Tian frowned. His eyes flashed and he said, "But with Lai Yen Jiufeng and Luo Xian's strength, a maze like this shouldn't be a problem for them." After a cultivator's strength increased, their memory was better than a normal person's. Even if this place was like a maze, it wouldn't be difficult for Lien Jiufeng and Luo Zian to find their way back. Of course these cliffs wouldn't be a problem for someone like Lien Jiufeng. Fat Cat laughed and said, "Nie Tian, carefully sense the aura in this space." Nie Tian frowned slightly and then activated the holographic divine glyph. Like a giant invisible hand, it spread in all directions. At this time, he felt an extremely profound aura surging in the space. Under the effect of this profound aura, the surrounding mountains seemed to be slowly moving. Nie Tian's eyes abruptly shrank. He subconsciously exclaimed, "How is this possible? To think that the towering mountain was actually moving. This was absolutely impossible. What power was so great that it could move so many mountains? Nothing is impossible." Little Fat Cat laughed and said, "Back when we were underground, I had already discovered that there was a great earth vein formation underground that could slowly move the earth. These mountains are above the ground, so of course they will be dragged by the ground." Well, Nie Tian's eyes widened and he took a deep breath. He didn't know what to say. There was actually a great formation in the earth vein that could directly move the ground. This was too terrifying. Nie Tian, you can't imagine how terrifying the experts of ancient times were. Since they were able to build a palace 10,000 meters underground, it wouldn't be strange for them to set up a formation to protect this palace. Fat Cat smiled faintly, her expression indifferent. "I understand." Nie Tian frowned and finally understood. He said, "The abyss passageway below is the gate to the underground palace. In order to protect the gate from being discovered by others, they set up a great formation of earth veins to change the gate at any time. In order to hide a door, he directly moved the ground. This kind of method is truly terrifying." Nie Tian finally came to a realization. No wonder Fat Cat said that Lien Jiufeng and Luo Zian would never be able to return after they left. When the two of them returned, they would most likely find that the position of the mountains had changed. They wouldn't look the same at all. It would also be impossible for them to enter the Nine Dragons' earth vein from Little Rock Village. There was no way the two of them knew how to enter Little Rock Village. That's not all. Not only does the gate have a spell formation protecting it, but it's also protected by a powerful spell formation. If someone tried to level the mountain peaks, the spell formation would activate, and not even a peak paramount god would be able to defend against it. Yang Qi chuckled. Yang Qi's eyes shone with a sinister light. Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and his expression tensed up again. The methods of the ancient experts were truly unimaginable. Even though he was in the middle of the killing formation, he couldn't sense the slightest bit of the formation's aura. After a while, Nie Tian calmed down a lot. He smiled faintly and said, "Fat, you must have a way to return after we leave this place, right?" "Of course." Fat Cat smiled proudly. "I'm a grandmaster of formations. That great formation of earth veins won't be a problem for me." With that, Fat Cat clawed at the air with his two fat paws, and a few strands of glazed energy poured out, gradually forming a profound and intricate formation diagram. This is the formation diagram for the great formation of earth veins. When we get back, take an empty god formation scroll and inscribe the diagram. Fat Cat chuckled. This formation diagram is priceless. If anyone else knew about it, they would give up their lives to get it. Nie Tian's eyes flashed and he gulped. He hadn't expected Fat Cat to be so freakish. He hadn't even realized that Fat Cat had already drawn the formation diagram. Nie Tian, let's get out of here. We'll talk about it when we get back to Little Rock Village. Fat Cat put away the formation diagram. Nie Tian nodded with a smile. Without hesitation, he left with the group. There were tens of thousands of mountain peaks. Nie Tian's group took half a day to leave the mountain range. Their current location wasn't too far from Little Rock Village. Not long after, they arrived at the entrance to the Little Rock Village. After entering the valley, Yun Tian was the first to walk over. He came to the side of the cliff and formed a strange hand seal. Then, a ray of light shot out and shot into the cliff. Rumble! The cliff seemed to have sensed it. With a rumble, it split open and a path appeared. Yun Tian knew how to open the path. Yun Qing told him before he died. Without hesitation, everyone entered Little Rock Village. Very quickly, they arrived outside of the forbidden area. At this moment, outside of the forbidden area, the people from the 4 palaces were still there. They didn't enter the forbidden area, but were waiting outside. This was what Nye Tian's group agreed upon when they entered the earth vein of the 9 dragons. No one else was allowed to enter the forbidden area. It seemed that these people were very obedient and didn't enter the forbidden area. As soon as Nye Tian and the others appeared, they were discovered, and someone exclaimed, "Someone's coming!" Everyone's gazes turned and locked onto Nye Tian's group. Their gazes gradually turned strange. "Why are there only a few people? Where are the others?" cried the crowd when they discovered that something was amiss. They were extremely dissatisfied. There were many people who entered the forbidden area with Nye Tian, including the 4 palace masters and 4 over-god level elders. But now, only Nye Tian's group appeared in front of the crowd. Yao Chen was the only over-god expert. The other palace masters and elders were nowhere to be seen. "Nye Tian, why are there only a few of you? Where are the others?" At this moment, a figure stepped forward and roared. He released his aura and was about to attack. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed and he glanced at the person. It was a cultivator from Cloud-Shattered Divine Palace. He was quite strong, an early high god. Nye Tian took a step forward, his gaze sweeping across the crowd as he said with a plain tone, "Something unexpected happened. Everyone else is dead." Dead? Everyone was stunned. Their eyes were filled with doubt and fear. The 3 palace masters and 4 elders were all over-gods. Were they really dead? If that was true, how did Nye Tian's group survive? "Brat, you're lying." The person was stunned at first when he heard Nye Tian's words. Then, he roared furiously, "Even a lowly mid-god like you survive. How could the palace master be dead? I'll kill you for making up such a lie." With a roar, the person moved. A black broadsword appeared in his hand, and he directly slashed at Nye Tian. "You're looking to die." Nye Tian's eyes suddenly darkened. The corner of his mouth twitched as killing intent surged in his eyes. Chapter 16:21. Nye Tian and the others had returned to Little Rock Village, but Lai Yu and the other palace lords and elders had yet to return. The people of each shrine would definitely be dissatisfied and might even cause a riot. However, Nye Tian did not expect that someone would attack him as soon as he arrived. For him, this was not a bad thing, but a good thing. "Since you have delivered yourself to my doorstep, don't blame me." Nye Tian looked at the person in front of him, the corner of his mouth raised into a cold smile, and said sinisterly in his heart. He wanted to kill this person as a warning to others. Boom! That person was extremely ferocious. With a roar, the black broadsword slashed down violently. A violent broadsword intent bloomed in the air, turning into a majestic shadow of a broadsword, pressing down on Nye Tian. "Brat, go to hell!" That person's face became hideous as he slashed down, as though he could already see the tragic scene of Nye Tian being chopped into minced meat. The crowd couldn't help but discuss in low voices when they saw this scene. Nye Tian only has the strength of a mid-god. He will definitely be chopped into minced meat by this slash. He is the #1 low god. It will be a pity if he dies like this. This kid's strength has risen a bit strangely. The grand competition of the 12 shrines has just ended, but he already has the strength of a late-stage mid-god. The crowd discussed while their eyes were locked on Nye Tian, eager to see a tragic scene. Facing that person's fatal attack, Nye Tian's eyes were filled with murderous intent. The corner of his mouth twitched, and his smile was extremely sinister. In the next moment, he struck out with his sword. The sword's shadow was like a dragon, soaring into the sky, directly smashing the broadsword's shadow above his head, and blasted towards the person who attacked. That person sensed that something was wrong and screamed. He wanted to shout out the following words, but he didn't have the chance. His figure only swayed for a moment before he couldn't bear the pressure of the sword intent and directly exploded into a bloody light. He died an extremely tragic death. Nie Tian's sword intent contained the soul-devouring sword intent. With one slash, that person not only had his martial body collapsed, even the divine sense in his godhead was directly erased. This sudden scene caused everyone's hearts to tremble. Their eyes trembled as they looked at the silver-haired figure, unable to say anything. Who would have thought that a superior deity would not even be able to block a casual strike from Nie Tian? Fortunately, they didn't know that the deaths of the other palace masters were more or less related to Nie Tian. Some of them were even personally killed by Nie Tian. If they knew this, it was unknown what kind of expression they would have. Nie Tian killed the man with a single slash. He took a step forward and leaped into the air. His ferocious eyes swept across the crowd as he shouted in a cold voice, "Is there anyone else who wants to make a move?" The cold and overbearing voice was filled with deterrence. Everyone looked at Nie Tian with trembling eyes, but no one dared to respond. The man killed by Nie Tian with a single slash was an early-stage superior deity. Most of the people here were mid-stage and lower deities. The few superior deities didn't dare to step forward. Cloud-shattering divine palace, heaven sword divine palace, crimson moon divine palace, the palace masters of your 3 divine palaces are dead. Nie Tian intimidated the crowd. Then, his voice turned deep and low as he said, "Now, I want you all to get out of Little Rock Village immediately." The people from the 3 divine palaces gasped simultaneously. They looked at Nie Tian with terrified expressions. It seemed that they didn't want to leave. "What, do you want to end up like the others?" Nie Tian's face darkened again. The murderous intent emanating from his body was almost tangible, spreading in the void. He looked like a god of slaughter, looking down on the crowd. Everyone's expression changed instantly when they felt the sharp murderous intent. Nie Tian was too ruthless. That slash just now was simply terrifying. "Let's go," someone shouted. Then, they started to move. The others followed suit. They didn't dare to stay for even a moment longer. "Yun Tian." Nie Tian looked at Yun Tian and gestured for him to open the door and let them leave. Yun Tian followed the crowd and opened the door. The people from the 3 divine palaces left one after another. Yao Chen thought for a moment and asked the people from the Medicine King Divine Palace to leave as well. In the blink of an eye, the thousands of people were almost gone. "Wait, I told them to leave, not you." Just when there were only a few dozen people left, Nie Tian's figure flickered, and he stopped them. The people that Nie Tian stopped were the trader of Little Rock Village, Yun Xian, and the people from Green Wolf Bastion. Nie Tian, Yun Xian originally wanted to take advantage of the chaos to leave, but he was discovered by Nie Tian. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. His face turned pale, and he couldn't speak for a moment. "Yun Xian, you traitor!" Only then did Yun Tian notice Yun Xian. He roared and moved in front of Yun Xian. "Yun Tian." Nie Tian took a step forward and gestured for Yun Tian to calm down. He then looked at Yun Xian and said, "Yun Xian, let me ask you, did you tell the others the way to enter Little Rock Village?" No. Yun Xian's voice trembled and his teeth started to chatter. "You really didn't?" Nie Tian's face darkened. A murderous aura spread out and enveloped Yun Xian. I really didn't." Yun Xian felt the murderous aura and his knees couldn't help but tremble. He directly knelt on the ground and looked like he was about to cry. "Big brother Nie Tian, to enter Little Rock Village, other than the seal, you also need the Yun clan's bloodline power. Even if Yun Xian told the others the seal, they still can't enter Little Rock Village." Yun Tian moved closer to Nie Tian and transmitted his voice. Nie Tian lightly nodded. He was worried that Yun Xian would tell the others the way to enter Little Rock Village. Nie Tian, what happened before was all my fault. I beg you, don't kill me. I'll do anything you want me to, as long as you don't kill me. Yun Xian knelt on the ground and begged bitterly. He was already crying. Nie Tian's eyes darkened. He coldly snorted and a sword intent gushed out, directly crippling Yun Xian's yuan meridians. Yun Xian, for a mere village chief position, didn't hesitate to collude with the Green Wolf stronghold and kill his own clansmen. This kind of person was no different from a beast. However, Yun Xian was someone from Little Rock Village. Therefore, Nie Tian didn't kill him and left him for Yun Tian to deal with. Yun Tian, his yuan meridians have already been crippled. As for how to deal with him, you decide. Nie Tian glanced at Yun Tian and said indifferently. Yun Xian solemnly nodded and walked towards Yun Xian step by step. His eyes were filled with a terrifying murderous aura. Yun Tian, we are clansmen. I am your grandfather. You can't kill me. Yun Xian's face was filled with fear as he cried and begged for mercy. If I don't kill you, how can I face the dead villagers of Little Rock Village? How can I face my grandfather? How can I face my father? Yun Tian abruptly took a step forward and slammed his palm, directly smashing Yun Xian's head into pieces. The traitor of Little Rock Village died just like that. As the new village chief of Little Rock Village, Yun Tian had to kill Yun Xian. Nie Tian, what about these people? Chen Wuqing walked over and looked at the people of Green Wolf Stronghold. Kill. Nie Tian's gaze swept across the people of Green Wolf Stronghold. The corner of his mouth trembled as he coldly spat out a single word, kill! Chapter 1622. 3 days later, in the temporary meeting hall of Little Rock Village, Nie Tian sat on one side of the hall while Yun Tian sat on the main seat. Opposite Nie Tian sat a skinny old man. It was the Demon Dragon King, Ming Hui. Thank you for coming, Elder Ming. Nie Tian smiled faintly at Ming Hui and bowed slightly to express his gratitude. The matter in Little Rock Village was almost settled. The people from the Green Wolf Fort were all killed without exception. This wasn't because Nie Tian was cruel. It was because these bandits killed too many innocent villagers. If he didn't kill them, how could he let those who died down? Ming Hui's appearance here was because Nie Tian asked Yao Chen to find him. Ming Hui coming here was indeed giving Nie Tian a lot of face. One should know that the Demon Dragon King hadn't left the Demon Dragon City for tens of thousands of years. This time, it was mostly because of Nie Tian's invitation. Nie Tian, why did you call this old man here? Ming Hui was very straightforward and asked. Elder Ming, this time, I called you here because I have something I need your help with. Nie Tian faintly smiled. He flipped his palm and a scroll appeared. He handed it to Ming Hui and said, Elder Ming, please take a look at this divine array scroll. Ming Hui received the scroll and used his divine sense to check it. His expression suddenly changed. His pupils shrank and his body slightly trembled. Teacher, are you all right? Yao Chen could not help but be stunned when he saw Ming Hui's reaction. He asked in a startled voice. He, of course, knew Ming Hui's identity. He had never seen such an expression from the latter. Ming Hui took a deep breath and his expression recovered a bit. He waved his hand to indicate that he was fine. However, his eyes were on Nie Tian and he asked, Nie Tian, where did you get this divine array scroll? Ming Hui was a formation master. He felt that the divine array scroll Nie Tian gave him had a very powerful aura. It was definitely a 9th rank divine array or even a saint rank one. Any formation master who got their hands on such a scroll would go crazy. A friend of mine carved this. It's just a formation diagram, it can't be activated. Nie Tian faintly smiled and said, Fat, come out. Fat Cat's figure appeared on Nie Tian's shoulder. It chuckled and looked slyly at Ming Hui. You can see the power of this formation scroll. Very good. Looks like you're a 7th rank divine formation master or above. Not bad too, mid-stage paramount god. You'll take care of the rest. When Ming Hui saw an exaggeratedly fat cat suddenly appear on Nye Tian's shoulder, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. When he heard the little fat cat's words, his expression couldn't help but become sluggish again. With just one look, little fat cat was able to guess his strength and formation mastery. This kind of perceptive ability was really impressive. Ming Hui was a super old monster who had lived for more than 600,000 years. It was the first time someone talked to him like this, and this person was a cat. Ming Hui was a super old monster who had lived for more than 600,000 years. This was the first time someone had spoken to him like this, and this person was a cat, which made him extremely unhappy. Teacher. Yang Zhongqiu, who was behind Nye Tian, bowed deeply and called out respectfully. Fat Cat nodded and looked at Ming Hui. You used to be the king of the Demon Dragon clan. But the Demon Dragon's heart has left your body. So the little guy beside you is the real Demon Dragon King. Am I right? Ming Hui frowned, but his expression calmed down. He looked at Nye Tian and said, Nye Tian, is this the friend you were talking about? Nye Tian smiled awkwardly. Ming Hui clearly misunderstood and thought that he had told Fat Cat about him. Actually, Nye Tian didn't say anything. He only said that Ming Hui was a friend. As for the rest, it was Fat Cat who saw it. The formation was drawn by me. Little Fat Cat snickered as it floated over. Grabbing the scroll with its paws, it opened it up and a powerful array formation aura gushed out. Boundless light flashed in the air as a huge array formation started to take shape. This is the Earth Vein formation. You must have a lot of questions in your heart. Say them. Fat Cat laughed and looked at Ming Hui with a provocative look. Ming Hui was stunned. He did have a lot of questions about the Earth Vein formation, but it was a little embarrassing for him to ask a cat. It's a rare opportunity for me to explain the formation personally. Fat Cat raised its eyebrows and smiled proudly. Nye Tian was speechless. He knew that Fat Cat had something up her sleeve, but there was no need for her to be so arrogant. Ming Hui thought for a while. In the end, he couldn't control the doubts in his heart and began to ask some questions about the formation. Fat Cat answered them one by one and explained them in great detail. Nye Tian and the others were confused. They had no idea what Fat Cat was talking about. Ming Hui and the little Fat Cat talked for a full half an hour, regretting that they hadn't met earlier. Mr. Chinchilla, your formation skills are the best I've seen in my life. Compared to you, the formation masters in the secular world are worlds apart. In the end, Ming Hui was completely convinced. He was deeply shocked by Fat Cat's formation skills. Nye Tian couldn't help but smile bitterly. Fat Cat did have some tricks up her sleeve. She could make the demonic dragon king bow down to her. Brother Ming Hui, your formation skills are not bad. I'll give you this formation scroll. Fat Cat smiled proudly and said, Also, I have a big gift for you. Mr. Chinchilla, this. Ming Hui's hands were trembling as he held the formation scroll. His excitement was indescribable. Fat Cat laughed and turned to look at Nye Tian. Nye Tian, where's the other scroll? Nye Tian took a step forward. Another scroll appeared in his hand and he passed it to Ming Hui. Ming Hui felt the aura of the scroll in his hand. His expression changed again. He was astonished and immediately froze. Brother Ming Hui, this is a god formation scroll. I want you to build a great 9 dragons formation according to the information on the formation scroll. Fat Cat said arrogantly. It was basically ordering Ming Hui. Great 9 dragons formation. This was a formation that Fat Cat had researched these few days. It was used to absorb the Mother Earth's origin energy in the 9 dragons' earth veins. However, Fat Cat only had formation skills, but her strength was limited. She couldn't build the formation herself. Therefore, she needed a formation master who was strong enough. Nye Tian thought of Ming Hui and called the latter over. Originally, Nye Tian wanted to ask Ming Hui for help. Looking at Ming Hui's excited reaction, it was as if he had gained a great advantage. It made people speechless. Brother Chinchilla, Thank you for your trust in me. Ming Hui held the scroll in his hand. His eyes were trembling. Even the way he addressed Fat Cat changed. Nie Tian frowned. Fat Cat was really incredible. She was crazy about taking in followers. Previously, she already had a follower, Di Shi Tian. Now, there was another Ming Hui. Moreover, the identities of these two followers were very terrifying. One was once a strong practitioner at the peak of Sword Dao and the other was once the demonic Dragon King. They were really scary. Chapter 1623. In the hall, Ming Hui was extremely excited. He kept the two formation scrolls and asked, Brother Chinchilla, when do we start building the Great Nine Dragons formation? Building the Great Nine Dragons formation is your business. I won't be participating. Fat Cat laughed and said, The Earth Vein formation map will help you find the entrance to the Nine Dragons Earth Palace. As for the materials needed to build the formation, the Nine Dragons formation map has them. It should be a piece of cake for you. I'm building the formation alone? Ming Hui was stunned. He guessed that the Great Nine Dragons formation was at least a rank 8 god formation. It was indeed difficult for him to build it alone. Believe in yourself. It's just a quasi-rank 9 god formation. You can definitely build it. Fat Cat chuckled. He and Nie Tian were pressed for time. Building the Great Nine Dragons formation would take at least a few months, or even years. Nie Tian couldn't wait that long. Once the Great Nine Dragons formation was built, it would be able to continuously absorb Mother Earth energy from the Nine Dragons' Earth veins. Martial artists could absorb the purest Mother Earth energy in the formation and convert it into their own power. Their cultivation speed would be tens or even hundreds of times faster than outside. But that kind of cultivation speed wasn't very attractive to Nie Tian. What he needed was a faster cultivation speed. Moreover, he had the Earth Vein source. Absorbing the power within would allow his cultivation to be twice as fast. The Great Nine Dragons formation was prepared for Yun Tian and the rest. Ming Hui saw the encouragement in Fat Cat's eyes and nodded heavily like a disciple. The Great Nine Dragons formation consumed large amounts of spiritual materials, but Ming Hui had a disciple of the Medicine King Palace Master. The entire Medicine King Palace would support him, so he didn't have to worry about spiritual materials. Big Brother Chinchilla, if you have time, I would like to discuss something about arrays with you. I don't know if I have the honor? Ming Hui bowed and spoke with a respectful look. Well, this. Little Fat Cat smiled awkwardly, feeling a little awkward. He and Nie Tian planned to leave the next day, because they had more important things to attend to. Fatty, since Elder Ming has invited us, let's stay for a few more days. Nie Tian smiled faintly. After all, he was the one who invited Ming Hui over. If he didn't even satisfy this request, it wouldn't be justifiable. All right, then we'll leave in 3 days. The Fat Cat laughed and said, It just so happens that there are some things about the great formation of the Nine Dragons that I need to explain to you. Thank you, Big Brother Chinchilla. Ming Hui was so excited that he couldn't control himself. He nodded repeatedly to express his thanks. Next, Nie Tian and the others left, while Fat Cat temporarily followed Ming Hui. Fat Cat did not rely on Nie Tian's celestial and demon nascent embryo space. It was only because he was worried about being detected by the main body that he rarely left the nascent embryo space. Nie Tian chose a small courtyard that was not far from Ming Hui and Fat Cat. If Fat Cat sensed that something was wrong, it would be able to enter the origin fetus space immediately. Nie Tian returned to the courtyard and entered his room. He had made up his mind to leave this place very soon. The most important thing that he had to do next was to fuse with the Earth Vein source. Fat Cat said that Nie Tian's current strength was too weak. If he were to forcefully fuse with the Earth Vein source, there would be a certain degree of danger. His demonic aura might not be able to withstand the power of the Earth Vein source and eventually explode. Nie Tian dared not take this risk. Therefore, he needed to borrow some other things to help him fuse with the Earth Vein source. As for what these things were, Fat Cat did not say. Their next step was to search for the things that could help Nye Tian fuse with the Earth Vein source. I wonder what realm my strength will reach after fusing with the Earth Vein source. Hopefully, it will rise to High God realm, Nye Tian murmured with a faint smile. He was currently a late-stage mid-god. The speed at which his strength was improving was already extremely monstrous. But for him, this speed was still not fast enough. He needed to be faster. When he thought of Emo Rushi and Cher, one in the Nye family's ancestral land and the other in the inescapable net, Nye Tian couldn't help but feel worried. Cher's situation in particular worried Nye Tian even more. Although he knew that the inescapable net would not harm Cher, he was worried about Cher's true identity. If she regained her memories, would she still be the same as before? Nye Tian still didn't know the relationship between Cher and the Netherworld Emperor. He had asked Fat Cat about it, but the latter had evaded the question and did not answer him in detail. Back when he was underground, Nye Tian encountered Lian Jiufeng, a person who bore a great resemblance to Cher. Lian Jiufeng was also an incarnation of the Netherworld Emperor and was accompanied by an ancestral dragon. What kind of person was the Netherworld Emperor? How could a single incarnation be so powerful? Nye Tian even suspected that the Netherworld Emperor had many incarnations. If the Netherworld Emperor were to awaken one day, would his incarnations disappear into thin air? Or would they be summoned back to his main body? A look of determination appeared in Nye Tian's eyes as he said inwardly, "Schwer, I don't care who you are or what you look like. You'll always be the Schwer I knew." What puzzled Nye Tian was the tear of the princess. Even now, he still didn't know what the tear of the princess was. The tear of the princess always saved his life when he was in the most dangerous situation. Ever since he activated the tear of the princess's protection last time, Nye Tian couldn't sense the tear of the princess's existence anymore. It was as if the tear of the princess had become a part of him and could not be sensed. It would only appear when he was in danger. Is the tear of the princess really that important to the ancient Ming race? Nye Tian frowned and murmured to himself. Lian Jiufeng had come back mainly for the tear of the princess. He kept emphasizing that Nye Tian didn't know what the tear of the princess was, and he didn't know what the tear of the princess meant. It seemed that the tear of the princess was very important. Otherwise, Lian Jiufeng wouldn't have bothered him. Of course, Nye Tian knew that the reason Lian Jiufeng hadn't fought him before was because he was afraid of destroying the tear of the princess. Lian Jiufeng was far stronger than Cher, and he seemed to know a lot of things. This puzzled Nye Tian. Did Lian Jiufeng recover some of his memories? Nye Tian thought. His eyes flashed. Lian Jiufeng had always been trapped in the door of golden flames. He had never left. How did he create the veins of 3 lives, how did he increase his strength, and how did he know so many things? This was too strange. Let's not think about this for now. Lian Jiufeng won't give up on the tear of the princess. He will come looking for me again. Nye Tian sighed softly. If he saw Lian Jiufeng again, he would definitely get to the bottom of this. Now, it's time to look at the other things. At this moment, Nye Tian seemed to have thought of something and couldn't help but smile. His eyes were filled with a hint of excitement as he flipped his palm and 3 scrolls appeared in his hand. Chapter 1624. In the room, Nye Tian looked at the 3 scrolls in his hands, his eyes shining with anticipation. The scrolls in his hands were the Yun clan's forbidden technique scrolls that Yun Qing had given him. In the past, the Yun clan had relied on these 3 great forbidden techniques to become a peak-level aristocratic family. Nye Tian guessed that the underground palace in the 9 Dragons Earth Vein, and even the Earth Vein Grand Formation that protected the Earth Vein source, were probably built by the Yun clan. One could imagine how terrifying the forbidden techniques of such a powerful aristocratic family were. Fat Cat had just broken the seal on the forbidden technique scrolls and directly handed them to Nye Tian. He didn't even open them himself. Nye Tian took out the first scroll, the dragon inscription talisman scroll, and slowly opened it. His hands were slightly trembling. The forbidden technique scroll had been sealed by the ancestors of the Yun clan, and it was estimated that no one had opened it for at least 1,000,000 years. The dragon inscription talisman scroll was slowly opened, and an ancient aura slowly gushed out. Suddenly, a powerful forbidden technique rune power released a strange aura that enveloped the entire room. Nie Tian sensed a powerful and frightening power surging into the scroll. His heart shuddered and his body trembled. On the dragon inscription talisman scroll, black dragon-shaped runes surged like small tadpoles, extremely strange. Nie Tian let out a long breath, and his divine sense tried to sense the dragon-shaped runes. Suddenly, a violent dark power rushed into his divine sense, turning into a black dragon shadow, as if it wanted to swallow his divine sense. Nie Tian's mind moved, and the holographic divine runes formed a spiritual barrier, blocking the black dragon shadow. His forehead was filled with sweat. He didn't expect the forbidden technique rune to be so strange, and also have the terrifying power to swallow divine sense. If it wasn't for his strong mental power and the holographic divine runes, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Nie Tian took a deep breath and calmed down a lot. He began to carefully sense the information of the dragon inscription talisman. According to the dragon inscription talisman scroll, the dragon inscription talisman had a strong effect on a cultivator's bloodline power, and at the same time, it contained a terrifying power. When the talisman was activated, the cultivator's strength would temporarily increase by several realms. The dragon inscription talisman was strictly divided into 4 levels: heaven, earth, profound, and yellow. Each level was further divided into 3 levels: intermediate, high, and intermediate. Nie Tian sensed the dragon inscription talisman in his body, and it seemed to be only high yellow, which was already not bad. The scroll also recorded that the dragon mark forbidden talisman had a strong backlash. The stronger the talisman, the stronger the backlash. Not even peak paramount gods had ever been able to cultivate such talismans to the heaven step level. They were so powerful that not even peak paramount gods would be able to handle them. Even Clan's ancestor, who had cultivated the talisman Tian. Heaven-level talisman. It was precisely because of the powerful backlash from the dragon inscription talisman that the Yun family's people who cultivated in talismans had a much shorter lifespan than their peers. Most of them died young. What a terrifying dragon inscription talisman! Nie Tian had a basic understanding of the dragon mark forbidden talisman. He couldn't help but frown and his eyes flickered. Not even peak paramount gods could withstand a heaven-grade dragon mark hexing talisman. The backlash from the forbidden talisman is far too strong. No wonder the Yun clan's ancestor sealed the forbidden technique scroll. Nie Tian mumbled to himself as the corner of his lips involuntarily curled up. If that's the case, then he'll be able to benefit from it. Nie Tian didn't know why his supreme dragon vein didn't suffer any backlash when it accepted the dragon mark forbidden talisman. Could it be because of the tear of princess? Nie Tian speculated. It was probably related to the tear of princess. If the tear of the princess could allow him to ignore the backlash of the dragon inscription talisman, then it would truly be too terrifying. Let's not worry about that for now. Nie Tian thought hard for a long time, but to no avail. He decided to stop thinking about it and said with a faint smile, "Since my body didn't suffer any backlash, doesn't it mean that I can cultivate the dragon mark forbidden talisman to the heaven grade? That's great." It was hard to imagine how much a dragon mark forbidden talisman of heaven grade or higher would increase Nie Tian's strength. The dragon mark forbidden talisman in my body is now at the high-grade yellow rank. The last time I activated it, my strength increased from mid-stage mid-god to peak mid-god, which is 2 small realms higher. When the dragon mark forbidden talisman's level increases, the increase in strength will be even greater. Nie Tian calculated in his heart and couldn't help but smile. He couldn't wait to cultivate the Dragon Mark Forbidden Talisman. However, he temporarily suppressed his excitement because he had 2 more Forbidden Technique scrolls in his hand. Next, Nye Tian opened the other Forbidden Technique scroll, the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline scroll. This, Nye Tian couldn't help but gasp when he sensed the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline scroll. He was so surprised that he couldn't speak for a while. The Forbidden Dragon Bloodline was even more powerful than the Dragon Mark Forbidden Talisman. It could directly change the power of the cultivator's bloodline and create a new and powerful bloodline, the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline. According to the scroll, after cultivating the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline, the cultivator's body would produce a kind of power called the Forbidden Dragon Power. This power was a double-edged sword. While it could increase the cultivator's strength, it could also put great pressure on the cultivator's martial body. The former village chief of Little Rock Village, Yun Qing, died because of the Forbidden Dragon Power. Nye Tian thought for a while. He wasn't in a hurry. He put away the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline scroll and looked at the last scroll, Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone. As soon as he opened the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone scroll, Nye Tian immediately felt an unusually strong spiritual force directly bombarding his divine sense. Fortunately, he was prepared. He increased the spiritual barrier of the holographic divine runes to protect his divine sense. After opening the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone scroll, Nye Tian sensed the information within and discovered that the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone could transform a cultivator's soul and bones. It was even more terrifying than the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline. After understanding the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone scroll, Nye Tian put away the scroll. At this time, he discovered that the Yun family's 3 great forbidden techniques, the Dragon Mark Forbidden Talisman, the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline, and the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone, were all stronger than the last. The Dragon Mark Forbidden Talisman stimulated the power of the bloodline. The Forbidden Dragon Bloodline changed the bloodline and created the bloodline, and the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone built the soul and bones. If a cultivator cultivated the 3 great forbidden techniques at the same time, they would have a comprehensive improvement. From the martial body to the soul, from the bloodline to the bones, there would be a qualitative leap. But cultivating the 3 great forbidden techniques at the same time would be a great threat to a cultivator's martial body. The 3 great forbidden techniques each had an extremely strong backlash. If they were used together, it was easy to imagine how strong the backlash would be. Nye Tian also learned some other information from the Forbidden Technique scroll. It was a cultivation experience left behind by a cultivator who had cultivated the forbidden techniques in the past. It was recorded that no one had ever cultivated the 3 great forbidden techniques at the same time. Even a cultivator with a naturally strong martial body could only withstand the suppression of 2 forbidden techniques at the same time. Moreover, their lifespan would be reduced again. After understanding this, Nye Tian couldn't help but hesitate. He naturally wanted to cultivate the 3 great forbidden techniques at the same time. However, whether his martial body could withstand the backlash of the 3 great forbidden techniques was unknown. Chapter 1625. In the room, Nye Tian was deep in thought. With his current strength, directly cultivating the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline and Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone seemed impossible. However, he could try to cultivate the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline first. However, he did not know how dangerous this would be, making him hesitate. Nye Tian, I think you shouldn't take the risk. At this time, Indra's voice suddenly sounded. The power of these 3 forbidden techniques is extremely rare. Although your martial body is different from ordinary people, your strength is still a bit weak. Why don't you try to cultivate the other 2 forbidden techniques when you reach the level of a lord? Indra's tone was sincere. It was obvious that he was thinking about Nye Tian's safety. The level of a lord. Nye Tian sighed softly and said, I only have the strength of a late-stage mid-god now. I don't know when I can reach the level of a lord. The earlier I cultivate the 3 forbidden techniques, the greater the improvement to a martial artist. I don't want to give up this opportunity. In his previous life, Nie Tian was a crazy person. This could be seen from how he fought without regard for anything else. In his previous life, he had entered the various forbidden areas of the Heaven Realm and obtained the primal star stones from the forbidden areas. Now there were 3 such powerful scrolls in front of him, but they didn't let him cultivate them. This was really too torturous. Nie Tian, what do you want to do? Indra suddenly realized that Nie Tian's eyes were slowly becoming firm. He couldn't help but cry out. Indra, if you were me, would you give up such an opportunity? The corner of Nie Tian's mouth pulled into a strange smile. He then opened the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline scroll. Nie Tian, don't be impulsive. Wait for Boss Chinchilla to come back and discuss it with him. Indra suddenly realized that Nie Tian was going to cultivate the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline directly. He couldn't help but cry out again. No need. Nie Tian smiled faintly and then opened the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline scroll. With a thought, the runes on the scroll began to surge. They actually became violent in an instant and turned into a terrifying power that circulated in the space. Forbidden Dragon Bloodline, come. Nie Tian's gaze was filled with determination. He roared, and the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline runes entered his body. Ah! At this moment, a tearing pain assaulted his entire body, causing Nie Tian to involuntarily let out a sharp cry. Nie Tian was an extremely patient person. He didn't care about ordinary pain at all. Now that he was screaming, it must be because the pain was unimaginable. Boom! In the next moment, the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline that had entered Nie Tian's body was like a ferocious beast, rampaging through his limbs and meridians as if it wanted to tear his body apart. Ah dash! Nie Tian couldn't bear the pain and couldn't help but let out an even more mournful cry. His delicate face had already become sinister and his silver hair was flying in the air. He seemed to have gone mad. Nie Tian felt that the power crazily pounding against his body, as if it wanted to seep into his blood and meridians. Hiss hiss hiss. Immediately after, an extremely ear-piercing sound came from Nie Tian's body. Horrifying bloody wounds appeared on his body, and his entire body was instantly riddled with holes. It was an extremely frightening sight. Desher Tian sensed the changes in Nie Tian's body and couldn't help but gasp. He was completely stunned. An extremely bloody scene was happening in Nie Tian's body. His meridians, flesh, and blood were being crushed by the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline runes bit by bit. The inside of his body had almost become a sea of blood. The Forbidden Dragon Bloodline runes were actually tearing his body apart. Nie Tian's entire body was twisted. His mouth was wide open, but not a single sound came out. Bang! At this time, the door was pushed open by a huge force. Fat Cat's figure appeared. Seeing the badly mutilated Nie Tian, his face couldn't help but darken. He cried out strangely, "What's going on?" Fat Cat wasn't far away. Hearing Nie Tian scream, he and Ming Hui rushed over. Boss Chinchilla, Nie Tian has cultivated the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline. Desher Tian's voice sounded. He immediately turned into a soul shadow and appeared in midair. He said with a trembling voice. Ming Hui, who was watching from the side, was stunned. He didn't expect that there was a remnant soul in Nie Tian's body. Moreover, this remnant soul was very terrifying. Fat Cat was stunned for a moment. Then, he saw that the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline scroll was releasing waves of runes that were frantically pouring into Nie Tian's body. He immediately understood everything. He sensed the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline scroll and had a preliminary understanding of the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline. Ah! At this time, Nie Tian let out another scream. His whole body couldn't hold on any longer. It seemed that he could turn into a pool of flesh and blood at any time. Boss Chinchilla, what should we do? Seeing this, Desher Tian asked in shock. Ming Hui, you guard outside. Don't let anyone near the courtyard. Fat Cat turned around and said to Ming Hui. The latter nodded and walked out of the room. Fat Cat closed the door and frowned. His brain was spinning rapidly as if he was thinking about something. Boss Chinchilla, quickly think of a way. Nye Tian can't hold on any longer. Deshir Tian saw that the wounds on Nye Tian's body were increasing and couldn't help but urge. Fat Cat shook his head slightly, indicating for Deshir Tian to calm down. He said, "The Forbidden Dragon bloodline originally destroyed a martial artist's original bloodline and created a new bloodline. This process is extremely painful. Most people can't bear it. Nye Tian has the Supreme Dragon bloodline in his body and the 10th Origin Vein Star Origin Stone. His recovery ability is very strong. His bloodline can be recreated very quickly. He won't be in any danger." The Forbidden Dragon bloodline changed the bloodline to create a new bloodline. This was a process of rebirth after destruction, just like a phoenix's nirvana. Ordinary martial artists definitely couldn't bear it and would be directly destroyed by the Forbidden Dragon bloodline rune. However, Nye Tian's martial body was strong. While his bloodline was destroyed, it was also constantly regenerating. Although this process was very painful, his life wasn't in danger. "Nye Tian is fine?" Deshir Tian was stunned and surprised. Then he saw that Fat Cat seemed to be thinking about something and had a very hesitant look. He couldn't help but ask, "Boss Chinchilla, since Nye Tian is fine, what are you still worried about?" Nye Tian wasn't in any danger. This made Deshir Tian feel relieved, but Fat Cat's expression made him a little uneasy. The Forbidden Dragon bloodline destroyed Nye Tian's original meridians and constructed a new bloodline. This process is very difficult. This deity is considering whether to let him absorb the rune power of the other Forbidden Technique scroll. Fat Cat looked at Nye Tian with flickering eyes and said solemnly. He wasn't worried about Nye Tian's life being in danger, but he was considering whether to let Nye Tian absorb the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone or not. This. Deshir Tian's pupils suddenly shrank, and he said in astonishment, "Boss Chinchilla, you're not joking, right?" A Forbidden Dragon bloodline had already tortured Nye Tian to this state. If the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone was added, could Nye Tian still bear it? Does this deity look like he's joking? Fat Cat glared at Deshir Tian snappily. He was also considering Nye Tian's safety. Fat Cat knew that if it was just the Forbidden Dragon bloodline, Nye Tian could completely bear it. But if the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone was added, then it wasn't necessarily so. But if he absorbed the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone rune at this time, it could make the 3 forbidden techniques perfectly fuse in Nye Tian's body. At the same time, the bloodline would be rebuilt, and the soul bone would also be reshaped. This would be of great benefit to Nye Tian's future path of cultivation. It would make his martial body and soul undergo a qualitative transformation. There weren't many opportunities for this. Nye Tian's divine sense was a little blurred at this time, and it seemed that he might faint at any time. In this case, Fat Cat had to make the decision for him. Chapter 1626. Fat Cat looked at Nye Tian, who was in extreme pain, and his blue eyes flickered with a strange light. He wondered what Nye Tian would do if he were in Nye Tian's shoes and encountered such an opportunity. For Nye Tian, this was an excellent opportunity. The rune of the Forbidden Dragon bloodline destroyed his meridians and reconstructed them. Fusing with the rune of the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone at this time would help Nye Tian perfectly fuse the power of the 3 great Forbidden Technique runes. In fact, with Nye Tian's physique, if he fused with the bloodline of the Forbidden Dragon first, and then fused with the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone after his strength increased, there wouldn't be any danger, but it would be more painful. But if he fused with the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone in the future, the effect would definitely not be as good as now, and it would be far inferior. Nye Tian, I will make a choice for you once. I believe that the divine demon nascent embryo body will not disappoint. Fat Cat said faintly. His flickering eyes suddenly became firm, and he slowly opened the scroll of the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone in his hand. Boss Chinchilla, are you really going to? Sakura saw Fat Cat open the scroll of the forbidden dragon's soul bone and was stunned, and he couldn't say the rest of his words. He didn't expect that Fat Cat actually wanted to let Nye Tian fuse with the power of the forbidden dragon's soul bone. Fusing two great forbidden techniques at the same time, could Nye Tian's martial body withstand it? Don't talk nonsense. Go back to the nascent embryo space and check on the condition of Nye Tian's martial body at any time. Fat Cat's eyes were firm, and he couldn't help but look a little nervous, and said cold. This time, it was not only related to the life and death of Nye Tian, but also related to the life and death of Fat Cat and Sakura. If Nye Tian died, Sakura's soul would definitely fly away, and although Fat Cat had no direct connection with Nye Tian, he would soon be found by Nine-Tailed Chinchilla after he lost the protection of the divine demon nascent embryo space. At that time, he would also end up dead. More importantly, Nye Tian was connected to a very complicated group of forces. If he died, the Wind and Cloud Alliance, the Holy Parliament, and the nets above snares below would all be affected. Fat Cat firmly believed that as long as Nye Tian was alive, he would definitely be someone who would fight against the 9 calamity deities and even the Emperor of the Netherworld. In truth, the one he was most wary of was not the 9 gods of calamity, but the Emperor of the Netherworld. If the Emperor of the Netherworld were to come back to life, he would be a catastrophe for the 9 realms. Fat Cat was anxious to increase Nye Tian's strength. Her primary goal was to deal with the 9 gods of calamity, but her final goal was the Emperor of the Netherworld, who was still in the process of resurrection. Cher and Lai Yinjiufeng had appeared. This was the sign of the Emperor of the Netherworld's rebirth. Thinking of this, Fat Cat no longer hesitated, and the look in her eyes became even more resolute. With a thought, she activated the Forbidden Technique runes on the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone and sent them into Nye Tian's body. The dark runes frantically surged and rapidly seeped into Nye Tian's body. Ah! The sudden, intense pain caused Nye Tian to howl in pain again. His face had already become so twisted that it was almost impossible to tell that he was human. He felt as if his body was being bitten by thousands of ants and insects, slowly devouring his body. Nye Tian, you have to hold on. Fat Cat's resolute eyes couldn't help but tremble when she saw how much pain Nye Tian was in. This time, the blockage was too great. Even Fat Cat couldn't maintain her composure. Boss Chinchilla, Nye Tian's consciousness is slowly weakening. At this moment, Sakura Heaven's voice rang out, and there was great panic in his voice. The 2 great forbidden technique runes combined with the dragon mark talisman that originally existed in Nye Tian's body not only destroyed Nye Tian's meridians, flesh and blood, but also dealt a great blow to his consciousness. Keep him awake. Fat Cat's face changed, and then she roared in a low voice. This! Sakura Heaven saw Fat Cat's reaction and couldn't help but stare blankly. Since coming out of the glazed pagoda, Fat Cat had never been so abnormal. Sakura Heaven, if Nye Tian's consciousness collapses, he will definitely die. Fat Cat roared, but the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone scroll in her hand was constantly releasing the Forbidden Technique runes. Sakura Heaven immediately reacted and released the soul power of his whole body to protect Nye Tian's consciousness. Nye Tian, you must stay awake. Sakura Heaven endured the spiritual impact of the Forbidden Technique runes, but he desperately shouted to remind Nye Tian to stay awake. Nye Tian's consciousness at this time was very blurred and was already on the verge of collapse. He felt that he was having a very, very long nightmare. He dreamed that he fell into a bottomless abyss and his body was out of his control. He wanted to struggle, but the more he struggled, the deeper he fell. Nye Tian, hold on, it's going to end soon, Fat Cat said nervously while releasing the Forbidden Technique runes and sensing Nye Tian's consciousness. He couldn't stop at this time. Since he had already gambled, he must gamble to the end. Boss Chinchilla, I can't hold on anymore. At this moment, Sakura Heaven howled miserably, and then his soul trembled. His phantom was actually almost scattered by the spiritual impact. He was originally a remnant soul, so he was afraid of this kind of spiritual impact. Fat Cat's eyes suddenly trembled. He knew that Sakra Heaven had already tried his best. If he persisted any longer, his remnant soul would collapse. Almost at the same time, the forbidden technique scroll in Fat Cat's hand finally stopped releasing the forbidden technique runes. Nia Tian, it's up to you now. Fat Cat let out a long breath, and then his figure moved, entering the origin embryo space. At this time, the space of the fiend god nascent embryo was dark. Endless black runes surged from all directions, as if they wanted to devour the space. Sakra Heaven, hide in the sea of gods and demons. Fat Cat glanced at the sea of gods and demons in the origin embryo space, and said to Sakra Heaven. Then his body shook, and he released endless colored glass chi to resist the impact of the forbidden technique runes. Nia Tian's other meridians, flesh, bones, and even his yuan meridians could be reconstructed, but the origin embryo space must not be destroyed. Even the forbidden dragon bloodline couldn't recreate the origin embryo space. At the same time, Nia Tian's consciousness became weaker and weaker. He felt like he had fallen into an abyss, surrounded by endless darkness and despair. Nia Tian. Fat Cat felt that Nia Tian's consciousness was about to disappear. He couldn't help but scream, and his body couldn't help but tremble. It seemed like he had lost the gamble this time. Nia Tian's consciousness weakened rapidly, and was about to collapse. Nia Tian. At this time, Nia Tian heard a voice in the endless darkness. It was a very familiar voice, Cher's voice. Light. Nia Tian's consciousness suddenly shook, and he saw a weak spot of light appear in the dark void. Then, it quickly enlarged, and instantly turned into a ball of light like a person. Cher. Nia Tian couldn't help but scream when he saw the figure clearly. His almost collapsed consciousness instantly recovered, and he became much more clear-headed. Cher faintly raised the corner of her mouth at him, and with a smile that could topple cities, her figure rose up. Nia Tian followed Cher's light, and his figure soared into the sky. His consciousness had completely recovered. I can't fail. The instantly sober Nia Tian immediately reacted. At this time, he was fusing with the forbidden technique runes. His whole body shook, and he let out a low roar. Chapter 16:27. Nia Tian growled and immediately checked his body. He found that his meridians, flesh, and bones were all destroyed. Even the 9 dragon veins were riddled with holes. Nia Tian, use your 10th origin meridian to speed up the reconstruction of the forbidden rune. At this time, Fat Cat's voice sounded. He felt that Nia Tian's consciousness had awakened in an instant and was also very surprised. But at this time, he couldn't care too much. It was more important to let Nia Tian reconstruct his body as soon as possible. Yes. Nia Tian nodded heavily. The forbidden rune had destroyed his body, leaving him almost an empty shell, but the 10th origin meridian was not damaged at all. Even the forbidden rune could not threaten the raw star stone. Nia Tian moved his mind and the power of the stars gushed out. It was like a warm current that surged in his body and warmed his body that was on the verge of collapse. At the same time, the flame of chaos also slowly seeped out and was actually tempering Nia Tian's martial body. The flame of chaos was formed by the fusion of the boundary of the universe and the heart of nothingness. The boundary of the universe contained the power of creation. This was an extremely terrifying power of creation, which had a great effect on the reconstruction of the martial body. Slowly, the broken meridians, flesh, and bones were reconstructed little by little. This was the process from nothing to something, from destruction to rebirth. It was like a silkworm turning into a butterfly, waiting for the moment to break out of the cocoon. At this time, Nia Tian, if seen from the outside, looked very terrifying. His body was covered with bloody wounds, but after those wounds split open, they quickly healed and new skin was formed. Ha ha ha, success! Fat Cat saw that the forbidden rune had disappeared and the space of the celestial demon original embryo had returned to its original state. He couldn't help but shout in surprise and almost jumped up. "Boss Chinchilla, did you really succeed?" Sakra's figure appeared. His face was a little dull, as if he couldn't believe it. "Of course." Fat Cat let out a strange cry and said proudly, "Nye Tian is indeed worthy of being the person that I like." He fused 3 forbidden rune at the same time. No one has ever done it before, and I guess there won't be anyone in the future who can do it. The Fat Cat almost went crazy with excitement. However, at this time, Nye Tian was having a hard time. Reconstructing his body was not an easy task. The feeling of having his bones broken and then regrowing them was very painful. Fortunately, Nye Tian had a resolute personality. This kind of pain was nothing to him. At least now, his life was no longer in danger. After Nye Tian had roughly reconstructed his body, he concentrated the energy of the stars and the primal chaos flame on his 9 elemental meridians. However, this process was very slow. It was not as easy as he had imagined. When the first meridian appeared, Nye Tian's eyes couldn't help but tremble. This was a dragon-shaped meridian, and it was even closer to the shape of a dragon than the Supreme Dragon Meridian. Moreover, the Dragon Meridian seal was still there. What was even more strange was that the dragon vein was covered with densely packed dragon-shaped inscriptions. It was the Dragon Mark Forbidden Talisman. Nye Tian sensed that this talisman was even more terrifying than before. It was of very pure power. Next, he continued to reconstruct his elemental meridians. After a few hours, all 9 elemental meridians were reconstructed. They were 9 supreme dragon meridians, and they were even stronger than before. Next, Nye Tian didn't delay and continued to reconstruct his flesh and bones. Half a day later, not only did his body have an outline, but it also had a complete set of flesh and bones. At this time, before Nye Tian could say anything, the Fat Cat cried out in surprise, "Martial body reconstruction complete." At this time, Nye Tian's body was releasing a sharp aura. It was as if he had ushered in a rebirth. Nye Tian suddenly stood up and looked inside his body. At this time, he could clearly feel the existence of the forbidden dragon bloodline in his blood. It was a very mysterious power that surged in his flesh. And on his bones there were exquisite inscriptions. They were the forbidden dragon soul bone inscriptions. Among the 3 great forbidden technique inscriptions, the forbidden dragon talisman was inscribed on the supreme dragon bloodline, the forbidden dragon bloodline was flowing in his flesh, and the forbidden dragon soul bone was inscribed on his bones. With the support of the 3 great forbidden techniques, Nye Tian's body had a qualitative improvement. He felt that his whole body was filled with power. He almost couldn't believe his powerful martial body. "Fat, I feel that my martial body is several times stronger than before. I'm afraid it's even more terrifying than a peak high god," murmured Nye Tian after calming down a little. His current strength was that of a late-stage mid-god. But in terms of the strength of his martial body, he was definitely comparable to a peak high god, or even stronger than a peak high god. Nye Tian felt that the current him, even without activating the forbidden technique, could easily fight against a late-stage high god or even a peak high god. Fat Cat nodded with a smile and said, "The 3 great forbidden techniques have greatly transformed your martial body. I'm afraid your supreme dragon bloodline has also become a lot stronger." "Very good." Fat Cat was very satisfied with the changes in Nye Tian's martial body. One must know that Nye Tian had only just fused the 3 great forbidden technique. In the future, as his strength increased, his martial body would become more and more terrifying. Fat Cat even felt that if Nye Tian could step into the early-stage Paramount God realm, he would probably be able to fight against a late-stage Paramount God or even a peak Paramount God. Nye Tian nodded with a smile and said, "Fat, thank you for this time. You already know?" Fat Cat was stunned for a moment. Then, he laughed dryly and said, I bet on your behalf. You won't blame me, right? Of course not. Nye Tian laughed and said, If it were me, I would bet on it too. There aren't many opportunities like this. Judging from the improvement of my martial body with the 3 great forbidden techniques, it was a good bet. Nye Tian was also a crazy person. He had a strong gambling mentality. Moreover, his luck had always been good. Every time he was in the most dangerous situation, he would always be able to escape. It could only be said that luck was also a part of strength. Nye Tian sensed the 3 great runes in his body and suddenly found that the other 2 runes, the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline rune and the Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone rune, had actually reached the high yellow class. How strange! Nye Tian was stunned. He had just fused the Forbidden Dragon Bloodline and Forbidden Dragon Soul Bone. How could they directly reach the high yellow class? What's so strange about it? Fat Cat laughed strangely and said, The 3 runes perfectly fused in your body. The Forbidden Dragon rune is the high yellow class. Of course, the other 2 runes are also the high yellow class. Nye Tian was stunned for a moment. Then, he said, So that's how it is. Cultivating 3 forbidden techniques at the same time was something that even the top geniuses of the ancient Yun family couldn't do. Nye Tian was really strong. What was even more frightening was that the perfect fusion of 3 forbidden techniques was something that had never happened before. Oh right! At this time, Nye Tian suddenly thought of something and exclaimed, I wonder if the 3 forbidden techniques produced any backlash in my body? No. Before he could check his body, Fat Cat directly responded and frowned, Your martial body seems to be a little special. When the 3 forbidden techniques perfectly fused, there was no backlash. Nye Tian absorbed the forbidden technique runes and didn't produce any backlash in his body. Even Fat Cat was surprised about this. Fat Cat knew that even if Nye Tian had the demon origin embryo, he couldn't prevent the backlash. At most, he could resist it. Chapter 16:28. There really wasn't any backlash. Nye Tian checked his body and exclaimed in surprise, What is going on? Nye Tian, when you were fusing with the runes, your consciousness was clearly on the verge of collapsing. Why did you suddenly regain consciousness? Fat Cat's blue eyes flashed as she asked in confusion. It's because of Cher. Nye Tian was stunned for a moment before explaining. At that time, Cher's figure appeared in my consciousness. It was that figure that helped me recover my consciousness. Cher again. Fat Cat's eyes darkened as she fell into thought. Earlier, when he had fought Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon in the depths of the earth, it had been Shue-Er's tear that had protected him. Now, it was Shue-Er's glowing shadow that had appeared and protected his soul awareness. It was obvious that it was the tear of the princess. The legendary tear of the princess. Is it really that terrifying? Little Fat Cat frowned and muttered to itself. Fat Cat didn't know much about the tear of the princess. He had only heard that it was one of the 3 great legends of the ancient Ming race. Other than that, he didn't know much about the tear of the princess. After all, he wasn't a member of the ancient Ming race. It was impossible for him to know their secret. Judging from Lian Jiufeng's pursuit of the tear of the princess, the tear of the princess must contain a very important secret. Forget it, I don't want to think so much. It's good that you didn't suffer any backlash. There won't be any obstacles in your future cultivation. Fat Cat couldn't think of anything, so she shook her head with a smile. Nye Tian couldn't do anything about it. If even Fat Cat couldn't guess the reason, then it was even more impossible for him to know the reason. Nye Tian calmed down and said to Sakra Tian, thank you so much this time. Sakra's soul had almost been destroyed in order to protect his consciousness. He really should thank him. It's my pleasure, my pleasure. Sakra smiled awkwardly. Then, he looked at the Fat Cat. He was thinking about when the Fat Cat would help him restore his body, and when she would tell him the secret of advancing to the Sage Realm. Don't worry, I will find a way to help you restore your physical body at the place we are going to next. Fat Cat certainly knew what Sakura was thinking and smiled faintly. Sure Tian was a wisp of remnant soul. Only by reconstructing his corporeal body could he leave Nye Tian's origin embryo space. He wanted to restore his corporeal body even in his dreams. Thank you, Boss Chinchilla. Sakura nodded his head repeatedly and was very respectful. Nye Tian looked at the two of them speechlessly. With Sure Tian's identity, it was indeed somewhat funny for him to bow and scrape to a fat cat. Fatty, what should we do with these scrolls? Nye Tian picked up the 3 forbidden skill scrolls and his eyes flickered. He knew that the forbidden skill scrolls contained the power to give birth to the forbidden skill. It wouldn't be long before new forbidden skill runes would be produced in the forbidden skill scrolls. Destroy them. Fat Cat smiled mischievously. A divine light flashed in her eyes as she said faintly, destroy them? Nye Tian was stunned. He suspected that he had heard wrongly. These were the forbidden skill scrolls that had been passed down from ancient times. It would be a pity if they were destroyed. The ancestors of the Yun family only sealed the scrolls and didn't destroy them. They probably didn't have the heart to do so. The forbidden skill scrolls are indeed very powerful. However, they are also very dangerous at the same time. In order to obtain great power, I'm afraid that most people will take risks out of desperation. The forbidden skill scrolls will only bring harm to others. Fat Cat raised her eyebrows and said faintly. Nye Tian thought for a moment. Fat Cat's words did make some sense. However, he still couldn't bear to destroy the forbidden skill scrolls. Why don't we give them to Yun Tian? Nye Tian frowned and suddenly said, absolutely not. Fat Cat let out a strange cry and firmly objected. Giving the forbidden skill scrolls to a child in his teens is simply harming him. You should keep them for yourself. Nye Tian curled his lips and smiled. Giving the forbidden skill scrolls to Yun Tian was indeed not a wise move. Although Yun Tian had matured a lot, he was still too young. He definitely wouldn't be able to resist the temptation of a powerful forbidden skill. Just like Yun Qing in the past, it would only bring harm to him. Nye Tian carefully put away the scroll. His heart relaxed a lot. Fat, you said that we're going to next. Where is it? Nye Tian suddenly remembered what Fat Cat had said and couldn't help but ask. A very dangerous place. Fat Cat smiled strangely and immediately shouted, Brother Ming Hui, come in. Ming Hui, who was outside the door, heard the shout and immediately pushed the door open. When he saw Nye Tian, he couldn't help but be stunned and said, Nye Tian, you've changed? Nye Tian was also stunned. He immediately laughed and said, have I changed? Yes. Ming Hui nodded and said, you seem to be taller than before. Your appearance has also changed. Your facial features seem to be more handsome than before. Nye Tian, who had his martial body reconstructed, was a little more burly. His facial features had also changed slightly. The lines on his face were more obvious and he looked much more handsome. However, his overall appearance was still the same. At least those who were familiar with him could recognize him at a glance. Maybe it's because of cultivation. Nye Tian laughed dryly and didn't explain anything. Brother Ming Hui, these are all small matters. Tell us about the Sunluo Ghost Realm. Fat Cat's figure also appeared. She chuckled and changed the topic at the right time. Sunluo Ghost Realm? When Nye Tian heard this name, he couldn't help but be stunned. It did sound like a dangerous place. Big Brother Chinchilla, are you really going to the Sunluo Ghost Realm? Ming Hui frowned. His expression was a little awkward and revealed a trace of worry. He said, this is a very dangerous place. It's a forbidden area of the God-shocking domain. It's really not a good place to go. It's precisely because it's dangerous that it's a good place. Fat Cat laughed strangely and said, I and Nye Tian both like dangerous places. This. Ming Hui was speechless. He actually had no words to refute. Fat Cat smiled slightly and then became a little more serious. He said, "There's something we want in the Sunluo ghost realm. We must go." "Is it the seven-leaf dragon-tongue orchid?" Minghui was stunned and couldn't help but ask. Previously, Fat Cat asked him where to find the seven-leaf dragon-tongue orchid. He said that someone had seen it in the Sunluo ghost realm. Fat Cat and Nye Tian wanted to go to the Sunluo ghost realm. It was obviously related to the seven-leaf dragon-tongue orchid. Yes. Fat Cat smiled faintly and didn't deny it. He said, Nye Tian obtained the Terra vein source. However, if he wants to fuse with it, he needs some auxiliary things. The seven-leaf dragon-tongue orchid is a good auxiliary thing. Fuse with the Terra vein source? Minghui was stunned and said, "The Terra vein source is the power of the origin. With Nye Tian's current strength, can he fuse with it?" He knew that Nye Tian had the devil aura and could fuse with the power of the origin. However, Nye Tian's strength was too weak. It was too dangerous for him to fuse with the Terra vein source now. "Don't worry. As long as I have the seven-leaf dragon's mouth orchid, I'll be able to help Nye Tian fuse with the earthstring source." Little Fat Cat chuckled, its eyes filled with confidence. At this time, Nye Tian also realized that they were going to the Sunluo ghost realm to help him fuse with the Terra vein source. Chapter 1629. Nye Tian didn't know what the seven-leaf dragon's tongue orchid was, but he felt that if it was enough to affect the fusion of demon essence and earth vein source, then the power of this herb was too great. Although he had his doubts, he didn't say it out loud. He trusted Fat Cat. "Brother Minghui, tell me about the ghost Sunluo region." Fat Cat chuckled, seeming very interested. "All right." Minghui knew that he couldn't stop Nye Tian and Fat Cat, so he could only sigh and say, "The ghost Sunluo region is a forbidden area of the shocking god realmverse. Legend has it that the ghost Sunluo region is the ancestral land of the ancient Sunluo demon clan. There are many secrets hidden there. The most frightening thing is that there is only night and no day. It is called the Sunfallen Land." "The Sunfallen Land." Fat Cat laughed and said playfully, "Continue?" Minghui nodded slightly and continued, "Although the ghost Sunluo region is in the shocking god realmverse, it is not under the jurisdiction of the 12 shrines. Moreover, the space-time there is very chaotic and often intersects with the subordinate worlds of the shocking god realmverse." Hearing this, Nye Tian couldn't help but frown. The ghost Sunluo region was indeed a bit strange. If space-time was so chaotic and intersected with many planes, then wouldn't there be many space-time vortexes? Space-time vortexes contained powerful space-time storms. Even overgod-level warriors might not be able to withstand them. "Elder Ming, if the ghost Sunluo region is not under the jurisdiction of the 12 shrines, then what force is in control?" Nye Tian didn't dwell on the matter of the space-time vortexes and asked. "There are two great dark forces in the ghost Sunluo region. One is the Sunluo Hall, the other is the Ghost King Palace. Rumor has it that the Sunluo Hall Master and the Ghost King Palace Master are even stronger than the Palace Masters of the 12 shrines. It is very likely that these two are already overgod." Minghui said solemnly, his eyes flashing. "Elder Ming, are you all right?" Nye Tian was sharp and sensed that Minghui's expression was strange, so he couldn't help but ask. Minghui was startled and seemed to hesitate, but he still sighed and said, "More than 200,000 years ago, I went to the ghost Sunluo region and met someone." Minghui couldn't help but hesitate again. "Who is it?" Nye Tian and Little Fat Cat asked in unison when they saw Minghui's expression. It was obvious that the person Minghui knew was not an ordinary person, or he wouldn't be so hesitant. "That person is called Limitless Seven Night." Minghui's eyes trembled slightly as he said, "At that time, he and I hit it off very well, and we became sworn brothers." Minghui took out a black token and said, "This token was given to me. Sunluo 7 gave," he said. "Sunluo Night," he said. "Minghui and I got." Minghui eyes Having said that, Minghui took out a black token and said, "This token was given to me by Sun Luo's 7 knights. He told me that if I needed any help in the future, I could take the Sun Luo token to him." Nie Tian took the token and saw that there was nothing on it. It was like a piece of iron in his hand. "Nie Tian, take this Sun Luo token when you go to the ghost Sun Luo region. It may be useful." Ming Hui nodded and said sincerely, "Thank you, Elder Ming." Nie Tian didn't stand on ceremony and put away the Sun Luo token. Since Sun Luo's 7 knights was the son of the temple lord, his status must be very high. Maybe the previous temple lord was dead and Sun Luo's 7 knights was now the temple lord. If that was the case, then Nie Tian's trip to the ghost Sun Luo region would be much easier. Wait. At this time, Fat Cat seemed to notice something and exclaimed, "You just said that you met Sun Luo's 7 knights more than 200,000 years ago. Did you see the 7-leaf dragon tongue orchid more than 200,000 years ago?" "Yes." Ming Hui nodded with a bitter smile and said, "Although it's been a long time, I'm sure that there must be a 7-leaf dragon tongue orchid in the ghost Sun Luo region." Fat Cat was speechless. More than 200,000 years? How was it a long time? It was a very long time. Nie Tian couldn't help but be stunned. It was indeed a long time. However, since the 7-leaf dragon tongue orchid had appeared in the ghost Sun Luo region, it at least meant that this place had this kind of medicinal herb. "Nie Tian, your martial body has just been reconstructed. Rest for a few days. When your body recovers, we'll set off immediately." Fat Cat thought for a moment and said to Nie Tian. Then, she went out with Ming Hui. In the room, only Nie Tian was left. His martial body had just been reconstructed, so he really needed a few days to adapt. In the next few days, Nie Tian worked hard to adapt to his new body. After 3 days, he felt that he had more or less adapted and was ready to leave with Fat Cat. In the valley at the entrance of Stone Village, Nie Tian and Fat Cat prepared to leave. In these few days, Fat Cat explained some of the details of the Great 9 Dragons formation to Ming Hui. With the latter's formation attainments, it wouldn't be a problem to build the Great 9 Dragons formation. Nie Tian specially reminded Yao Chen that when the Great 9 Dragons formation opened, he was to find Zhao Zi of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace and ask the latter to enter the formation to cultivate. Zhao Zi had once asked Nie Tian to use the Mother Earth Primordial Stone to help him raise his strength. Nie Tian never had the chance to do so, so he could only use the Great 9 Dragons formation to fulfill his promise. Anyway, it didn't matter if there was one more person in the Great 9 Dragons formation. This time, Nie Tian and Fat Cat entered the ghost Sun Luo region alone. Nie Qiu, Ed and the rest stayed by Ming Hui's side. Chen Wuqing also stayed, waiting for the Great 9 Dragons formation to open. Sun Luo ghost Sun Luo region was an extremely dangerous place, and Nie Tian did not want others to take the risk with him. Nie Qiu, you have the purple demon eyes and silver wolf hand. Train properly in the Great 9 Dragons formation. When I return, I look forward to a huge breakthrough in your strength." Nie Tian could see that Nie Qiu was unwilling to leave, so he took a step forward and said indifferently, "Nie Qiu will definitely not disappoint Mr." Nie Qiu nodded his head. He had followed by Nie Tian's side for a long time, and had watched Nie Tian fight his way from the 3,000 small worlds to where he was today. And he himself, from a demon lord, was influenced by Nie Tian, and became the current Nie Qiu. To be able to follow Nie Tian, Nie Qiu did not regret it at all, even though the former made him a spirit-devouring rat for a long time. If not for Nie Tian, Nie Qiu would definitely not be able to step into the 9 domains, and would not have the strength he had today. Nie Tian took a glance at Chen Wuqing and smiled faintly. "Farewell, Chen Wuqing. Goodbye." Chen Wuqing nodded his head, his eyes extremely resolute. In this trip underground, he had truly realized the difference between him and Nie Tian, and he had to quickly raise his strength, so that when they meet again, his strength would not be too far away from Nye Tian. Nye Tian nodded his head, and after bidding farewell to everyone, he did not stay any longer and turned to leave. Everyone watched as the silver-haired figure walked further and further away, their expressions becoming serious. Teacher, is the place that big brother Nye Tian is going to be very dangerous? Ed suddenly looked at Ming Hui and asked. Ming Hui laughed and said, to Nye Tian, that place should not be considered dangerous. Ming Hui looked at the resolute back view, as though he saw himself in the past. For the sake of his heart, he would disregard everything. Chapter 1630. 5 days later, high up in the sky was clear and cloudless. Boom! At this time, a loud roar came from the sky. A huge divine boat broke through the strong astral winds and flew in the void. This divine boat was 10,000 meters long. From afar, it looked like a huge fish swimming in the sky. At this moment, in a corner of the divine boat, a silver-haired figure was sitting cross-legged. His breathing was even, and he seemed to be resting with his eyes closed. This figure was none other than Nye Tian. At this moment, he was cultivating. Even if the surroundings were noisy, Nye Tian would not give up on cultivating for even a minute. Since he boarded the divine boat, he had been sitting in a remote corner and had not moved for 3 days. Nye Tian used 2 days to rush from the cloud-splitting mountain to Jiufang City and took the divine boat to the Sunluo Ghost region. The Sunluo Ghost region was at the edge of the shocking god territory. It was very far away. Even with the speed of the divine boat, it would take a few days to reach. He originally thought that not many people would go to a place like the Sunluo Ghost region. He did not expect that there were more than 10,000 people on the divine boat. Cultivating in such an environment was indeed a test of a martial artist's patience. Sister, is this big brother dead? He hasn't moved for a long time. At this time, a girl in pink finally could not stand it anymore. She walked slowly in front of Nye Tian and said in a childish voice. The girl was about 5 or 6 years old. She was slightly plump, had a pair of big eyes and a snow-white face. She looked like a porcelain doll. Beside the girl stood a 15 or 16-year-old girl in purple. Her eyes were shining with a strange light. She carried a long sword on her back and had a delicate and determined face. She did not have the naivety of a young girl. Instead, she gave off a heroic vibe. The girl in purple had also observed Nye Tian for a long time. She found that Nye Tian was very strange. His aura was restrained and she could not feel any aura at all. He looked a little like he was dead. Sister, he is not moving at all. I'm afraid he is really dead. The girl in pink walked to Nye Tian's side and suddenly stretched out her hand, wanting to see if Nye Tian was really dead. Shan don't touch her. Seeing this, the purple-clothed girl's expression changed, and she couldn't help but scream. Yeah! At this moment, a strange cry suddenly came from Nye Tian's body. Immediately, a small beast flickering with golden radiance leaped out of nowhere and jumped onto Nye Tian's shoulder. Nye Tian's eyes also opened at this moment. He stretched out his palm, and the little beast on his shoulder leaped onto his palm. That furry little beast was about the size of an adult kitten. Its whole body was covered in flickering golden fur. At first glance, it looked like a golden fireball. This little beast was Little Gold Ho. In just a few days, Little Gold Lion's body had grown a lot. Originally, it was only the size of a baby's fist, but now it was as big as Fat Cat. Nye Tian had specially bought a large spirit pet ring for Little Gold Ho to stay inside. Moreover, it could come and go as it pleased. Nye Tian rose to his feet, looked at the 2 girls in front of him, and said with a faint smile, "Girls, what can I do for you? My apologies, my sister is naughty and disturbed you." The purple-clothed girl smiled awkwardly and quickly apologized. "It's fine." Nye Tian smiled and said, "My name is Nye Tian. What's your name?" The purple-clothed girl was stunned for a moment. She didn't expect Nye Tian to be so direct. She immediately said, "My name is Emoihan." This is my sister, Mo Lingshan. Wow. At this time, Mo Lingshan suddenly shouted in excitement and happily shouted, "What a cute kitten! Can I hug it?" Of course. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment. Then, he immediately smiled and handed little gold hoe to Mo Lingshan. The Mo sisters were very innocent. They didn't know what the little thing in Nie Tian's hand was. Mo Lingshan even thought that little gold hoe was a kitten. Nie Tian signaled little gold hoe not to move around and release its golden flame power at will. It would be bad if it hurt Mo Lingshan. Mo Lingshan happily walked away with little gold hoe in her arms and ran to the side to play. "Miss Mo, are you also going to the Sunluo ghost realm?" Nie Tian hesitated for a moment before asking. He was very curious. The Mo sisters were so young and their strength wasn't strong. Why did they want to go to the Sunluo ghost realm? Yes. Mo Han didn't pretend at all. She nodded with a smile and said, "I'm taking Shan to the Sunluo ghost realm." Nie Tian frowned. He swept his divine sense over Mo Han and found that her strength was at the peak of the lower god realm. Moreover, her sword principle had reached the sword bone realm. Nie Tian's eyes couldn't help but tremble when he noticed this. Although this kind of strength wasn't strong, it was ridiculously strong for a 15 or 16-year-old girl to possess it. Could she be a cultivator with innate godhead like Chen Wuqing? Nie Tian was stunned for a moment. He was even more baffled because Mo Han's sword principle realm was also extremely shocking. She was actually at the sword bone realm. It should be noted that even Nie Tian was only at the sword vein stage. Mo Han was much younger than Nie Tian, but her sword principle realm was actually higher than Nie Tian's. It was truly frightening. Among all the people Nie Tian had met, only Cher's sword principle talent could compare to Mo Han's. But Cher could integrate the sword intent inheritances of more than 10,000 swordsmen from the ancient era. She was a swordsman with Wan Jian's bloodline. How could Mo Han possess such formidable sword principle strength? Just you and Shan? Nie Tian suppressed the shock in his heart and asked. Mo Han's strength had indeed exceeded his expectations, but if she dared to bring her sister into the ghost Sunluo domain, it would be too dangerous. Not everyone dared to enter the ghost Sunluo domain. "There's only me and my sister now, but my second uncle is already waiting for us there." Mo Han answered without any suspicion. "That's good." Nie Tian smiled faintly, then asked, "Is Miss Mo going to the ghost Sunluo domain for something?" "The Ghost King's wedding." Mo Han laughed, then noticed the stunned expression on Nie Tian's face. "You don't know about the Ghost King's wedding?" "The Ghost King's wedding?" Nie Tian was dumbfounded for a second, then smiled awkwardly, shaking his head. "What is this? I really don't know." "The Ghost King Palace Lord is going to marry the 72nd wife. At that time, the Ghost King Palace will set up a Ghost King arena, and anyone who can win against the Ghost King Palace's cultivators can make a request to the Ghost King Palace Lord." Mo Han laughed, seemingly a little excited, saying, "The Ghost King's Celestial Palace Lord is very powerful. Many people are aiming for the Ghost King's Celestial Palace's marriage, hoping to win against the Ghost King's Celestial Palace's cultivators on the Ghost King battle stage, and make a request to the Ghost King's Celestial Palace." "So that's how it is." Nie Tian nodded slightly. No wonder so many people went to the ghost Sunluo domain, so there was such a thing. He then smiled and said, "This Ghost King Palace Lord is really powerful. He has already married the 72nd wife." Mo Han nodded and said, "I heard that the Ghost King Palace Lord's 72nd wife is very powerful, a person who has the legendary 10 great innate other pupils. It seems that the 7th other pupil is the 9-color pupil." 9-color pupil. Hearing these 3 words, Nie Tian's pupils suddenly shrank, and he actually cried out in surprise. The 7th other pupil is the 9-color pupil. Not many people have this other pupil. Nie Tian only knew one person, and that was Rui Qianyu. His first reaction was that the Ghost King Palace Lord's 72nd wife was Rui Qianyu. Chapter 1631. Hearing Emoihan mention that the Ghost King Palace Master's 72nd wife was a martial artist with 9 colored pupils, Nie Tian's face darkened. Because he only knew one martial artist with 9 colored pupils, and that was Rui Qianyu. Big brother Nie Tian, are you alright? Emoihan saw Nie Tian's strange expression and thought she had said something wrong. Her small face couldn't help feeling nervous. I'm fine. Nie Tian calmed down and his expression softened a lot, asking, Miss Emo, what else do you know about the Ghost King's marriage? Can you tell me? Of course. Emoihan smiled faintly and immediately told Nie Tian about the Ghost King's marriage. The Ghost King's marriage was a major event in the Sunluo Ghost domain, and every time it happened, it would alarm many cultivators in the God domain. The Ghost King Palace Master was a mysterious character. He had married 71 wives before, but each wife died mysteriously in less than a year with the Ghost King. After that, the Ghost King began to search for his next wife. Most importantly, when the Ghost King married, he would set up a Ghost King arena, which was a good opportunity for cultivators in the God domain. As long as one entered the Ghost King arena and defeated a cultivator from the Ghost King's celestial palace, they could propose a condition to the Ghost King Palace Master. In principle, any condition was fine, but no one would be stupid enough to propose a particularly outrageous condition, which was likely to anger the Ghost King. After listening to Emoihan, Nie Tian couldn't help but frown and ask in a low voice, every single wife of the Ghost King died mysteriously. Has no one ever suspected anything? He had married 71 wives, and every wife died mysteriously. There must be something fishy. Who would dare to suspect? Emoihan was stunned for a moment, then asked in return. Nie Tian's eyes darkened, and then he fell silent. The Ghost King Palace Master's position in the Sunluo Ghost domain was absolutely the highest existence. Not to mention that his wife died mysteriously, even if he killed her, who would dare to say anything? This was the cruel world of martial arts, where strength determined everything. I think those women chosen by the Ghost King to be his wives all had no choice. Emoihan sighed softly, her eyes trembling. Knowing that there was something strange about the Ghost King's marriage, she was still forced to be his wife. How could this helplessness be explained by having no choice? Miss Emo, what is your purpose in going to Sunluo Ghost domain this time? Nie Tian asked Emoihan after calming down. For Emoihan to bring a 5- or 6-year-old girl to Shinra Ghost domain, it was obvious that he was not there to watch the fun. There must be something important. It's not convenient for me to talk about it, Emoihan said bluntly with a faint smile. Nie Tian smiled and nodded. Since the other party didn't want to tell him, he wouldn't force him. Huang Xiaolong guessed that Emoihan must have run into some difficulties and wanted to defeat the Ghost King's Celestial Palace's cultivators through the Ghost King Battle Arena, thus requesting the Ghost King Palace Master's help. Little girl, where are you running to? Just at this moment, a roar came from not far away, sounding very angry. Elder sister, a bad person is hitting me. Immediately after, a very familiar child's voice rang out. It was Emo Lingshan's voice. Shan. When Emoihan heard her sister's voice, she frowned. Then, her figure flashed, turning into a sword image as she flew over. Nie Tian Mo's face sank and he followed. Among the crowd, several cultivators in black approached Emo Lingshan step by step with ferocious gazes. After all, Emo Lingshan was still young. Tears welled up in her big eyes, flowing down her face. However, she said proudly, if you dare to hit me, my elder sister will not let you off. Your elder sister? One of the cultivators in black laughed coldly. Your elder sister better not appear. Otherwise we will kill her as well. Is that so? Before the cultivator in black finished speaking, a cold voice rang out. Then, a valiant figure appeared, blocking Emo Lingshan. It was Emoihan. Elder sister. Emo Lingshan cried when she saw Emoihan. Shan don't be afraid, elder sister is here. Emoihan shielded her sister behind her. Cold eyes stared at the cultivators in black and said, "You are so shameless. So many men bullying a little girl." These cultivators in black were not weak. The strongest was a mid-stage high god, while the rest were early-stage high gods. So many people bullying a little girl of 5 or 6 years of age. It was indeed shameless. Shameless? The leader of the group laughed mischievously. His eyes moved greedily on Emoihan's body. His eyes shone with a lustful light and his saliva was about to drip down. He said, "Little beauty, you will soon see what true shamelessness is. Courting death." Emoihan knew that the other party had evil thoughts. She couldn't help but roar. She unsheathed the sword on her back. A sharp sword image whizzed out and attacked the person in front of her. That person reacted very quickly. He struck out with his palm and shattered the sword image. At the same time, an enormous wave of energy rolled towards Emoihan. Although Emoihan's realm of the sword was very high, her actual strength was too weak. She was only a peak low god while her opponent was a mid-stage high god. The gap between their realms was nearly 2 whole realms. Her realm of the sword couldn't make up for it. Emoihan felt an enormous force coming at her. She was sent flying. She was still in the air when she suddenly felt a soft force appear, supporting her and steadily landing on the ground. "Miss Emo, are you all right?" Nia Tian appeared behind Emoihan and asked with a faint smile. "I'm fine. Thank you, brother Nia Tian," Emoihan said softly. Nia Tian nodded. He took a step forward and a sword aura soared into the sky. His entire body was like an enormous sword. He stood there like a mountain. "Brat, don't meddle in other people's business." The leading expert in black sneered when he saw Nia Tian's ferocious and strange aura. He said, "You have to pay the price if you want to be a hero and save the damsel in distress." "Shaner, what happened?" Nia Tian didn't even spare the black-robed cultivator a glance. Instead, he looked at Emo Lingshan and asked indifferently. Emo Lingshan looked very wronged. She hugged Jean too and said, "They want to rob me of my kitten." Nia Tian's eyes narrowed. It turned out that these people had their eyes on Jean too and wanted to rob her. A group of high god experts wanted to rob a little girl in front of so many people. It was really shameless. Nia Tian looked at the people around him. They all wore cold faces. No one was willing to help. "Brat, I'm from the Divine Glacial Palace. If you know what's good for you, get lost. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." The leader smiled coldly. His eyes were filled with terrifying killing intent. "People from the Divine Glacial Palace." Nia Tianling laughed. He didn't hide his disdain. He said coldly, "I'm going to interfere in this matter." The Divine Glacial Palace was one of the 4 most powerful palaces among the 12. It was a peak force in the entire God-shaking realmverse. It was no wonder that no one dared to interfere. Chapter 1632. Nia Tian's ice-cold voice reverberated in the air and fell into the ears of the crowd. It was like a thunderclap from the highest heavens. In the crowd's opinion, Nia Tian was definitely out of his mind by intervening despite knowing that the other party was from the Divine Arctic Palace. The surrounding crowd couldn't help but look at Nia Tian in a different light. They suspected that this kid was courting death. Seeing a little girl being bullied, you chose to stand by and watch. In my opinion, the ones who are out of their minds are you. Nia Tian, of course, knew what the crowd was thinking. He didn't try to hide anything and roared. Everyone was taken aback, and the way they looked at Nia Tian became not only strange, but also vicious. "Brat, with your strength, you want to meddle in other people's business? You're courting death." The leader of the black-robed men roared in a low voice. After that, he laughed coldly and took a step forwards. A terrifying cold energy gushed forth from him. The surrounding space seemed to be frozen. The coldness was extremely intense. "Is that so?" Nia Tian also let out a cold laugh. With a shake of his body, a sword aura shot out like a dragon soaring through the clouds. Kaboom! A loud explosion sounded in the air. The moment the two forces collided, the cold energy was shattered. The black-robed warrior was forced to retreat by the sword momentum. He almost couldn't stand this. The crowd couldn't help but gasp when they saw this scene. Their eyes trembled. They couldn't believe their eyes. For a late-stage mid-god to be able to force back a mid-stage high-god by relying on the momentum of his sword was just too bizarre. Emoihan, who was behind Nyetian, was also stunned. Her beautiful eyes were dull and her whole body was stiff. She originally thought that Nyetian's battle strength was about the same as hers, or even weaker than hers. Although Nyetian's strength was stronger than hers, his realm of swordsmanship was weaker than hers. Therefore, his battle strength might not necessarily be stronger than hers. But now, it seemed that Nyetian's battle strength was too terrifying. He actually had the upper hand in a head-on clash with a high god expert. "Brat, why is your strength so strange?" The black-clothed martial artist stabilized his body and took a deep breath. His eyes could not help but tremble as he cried out in a trembling voice. "Scram before I get really angry." Nye Tianling looked coldly at the black-clothed cultivator and growled deeply. The wild sound waves were like raging waves, resounding in the air, abnormally overbearing. Nye Tian didn't want to kill anyone. With his strength, that exchange just now was enough to kill the black-clothed martial artist. However, he didn't do so because he didn't want to attract the attention of others. "Brat, you're too arrogant." The black-clothed cultivator's eyes flashed fiercely as he roared, "I didn't want to kill you, but you asked for it." Right after the berserk voice sounded out, the black-clad cultivator's aura soared wildly. A cold energy surged out, and space seemed like it would freeze. "Big brother Nye Tian, watch out." Emoihan's little face couldn't help but tremble as she felt the chill in the air. She didn't understand Nye Tian's strength, and was very worried about his safety. Little did she know that when Nye Tian's strength was far weaker than it was now, he had once killed a high god at the pinnacle. Now that Nye Tian's strength had risen to the late stage of mid-god, coupled with the improvement of his martial body brought about by the three great forbidden skills, a casual attack from him could instantly kill an ordinary high god. "You reckless dog, go to hell!" The black-clothed martial artist roared and struck out with his palm. A giant ice palm came crashing down like an iceberg, fiercely pressing down on Nye Tian. Nye Tian stood where he was, unmoving like a mountain. There was not the slightest fluctuation in his eyes. Only killing intent was slowly brewing. "You're courting death." Just as the giant ice palm was about to press down, the corners of Nye Tian's mouth twitched. Immediately after, he struck out with his sword. The sword's shadow was as swift and fierce as lightning, blazing like fire. It suddenly whizzed out and directly bombarded the giant ice palm into pieces. Then, it attacked the black-clothed martial artist. Boom! In just an instant, the sword's shadow flew past. The black-clothed martial artist didn't even have time to scream before he died on the spot. Not even his bones were left. Only a godhead was left floating in the air. A ghastly scene occurred. Everyone's eyes widened and they held their breath. The scene fell into a deathly silence. No one had expected that the winner of this duel would be Nye Tian. A medial deity martial artist had killed a superior deity martial artist. Moreover, he had done it so effortlessly. This was simply too terrifying. Everyone could see that Nye Tian hadn't displayed his strength at all. That sword strike just now was just a casual strike. Nye Tian's true strength was unimaginable. "Does anyone else want to try?" Nye Tian took a step forward. His eyes were cold as he stared at the other martial artists. Those martial artists felt like sheep being stared at by a ferocious wolf. Their bodies were drenched in cold sweat, and they couldn't help but retreat. "Scram!" Nye Tian roared in a low voice, extremely domineering. The martial artists from the cold palace didn't dare to stay any longer and left in embarrassment. Nye Tian didn't care about them. He retracted his sword aura and slowly turned around. He looked at the Mo sisters and smiled. Miss Mo, are you two alright? Mo Ihan finally reacted. Her stiff face softened a little as she said, We're fine. Many thanks to Big Brother Nyetian. It's nothing, Nyetian said with a faint smile, his expression calm. Mo Ihan's beautiful eyes flickered. What happened just now might have been nothing to Nyetian, but it was a great favor to the sisters. If it wasn't for Nyetian, their lives might have been in danger. Mo Ihan would remember this kindness in her heart. Nyetian being able to help was out of Mo Ihan's expectation. Although Nyetian was very strong, his opponent was still a member of the Arctic Divine Palace. Nyetian killing a cultivator from the Arctic Divine Palace had undoubtedly offended the Arctic Divine Palace. However, Nyetian didn't seem to care at all. It was as if he didn't care about the Cold Palace at all. Shan-er, return little gold lion to Big Brother Nyetian, Mo Ihan said to her sister. Of course, she knew that it was gold lion, not a kitten. The kitten is so cute. Although Mo Lingshan was a little reluctant, she still returned gold lion to Nyetian. Nyetian smiled faintly and let little gold lion return to the spiritual pet ring. If this was an ordinary gold lion, Nyetian could have given it to Mo Lingshan. However, his gold lion had swallowed the golden blaze flint. In a few months, it would grow into a real savage beast. Big Brother Nyetian, your little gold lion seems to be different from an ordinary gold lion. Did it eat something special? Mo Ihan hesitated for a moment and finally asked. She could feel that there was a very terrifying power in little gold lion's body. It was slowly awakening, and it was extremely terrifying. It ate something. Nyetian smiled faintly and didn't explain too much. At the same time, he said in his heart, in the future, I better not let little gold lion out so casually. In case someone sees through it and causes trouble. Mo Ihan could see that Nyetian didn't want to say more. She smiled faintly and didn't ask any more. After a few hours, the moving divine boat slowly stopped and floated in the sky. Big Brother Nyetian, we have arrived at the Sunluo Ghost region. Mo Ihan was a little excited as she pointed below. Nyetian looked down. In front of him was a gloomy forest. It was extremely vast and had a radius of about a few thousand miles. Chapter 1633. After 5 days, Nyetian finally arrived at the legendary Sunluo Ghost region. He couldn't help but feel a little excited. We have arrived at the Sunluo Ghost region. At this time, a powerful voice sounded on the divine boat. Then, the door at the edge of the divine boat opened, and everyone began to leave the divine boat. Nyetian and Mo Ihan were not in a hurry. They waited until almost everyone left before preparing to leave. Stepping out of the divine boat, Nyetian's figure froze in midair. He looked at the Sunluo Ghost region below, activated the holographic divine pattern, and sensed the aura in the surrounding space. He couldn't help but frown. The Sunluo Ghost region was indeed as Minghui said. It was dark and there was no sunlight. It seemed that this was a space that sunlight couldn't reach. It was very strange. Nyetian sensed the aura in the space. There seemed to be a strange restriction in the space. It was vast and boundless, covering the entire Sunluo Ghost region. Brother Nyetian, let's enter the Sunluo Ghost region now. Mo Ihan saw others entering the Ghost region, one after another, and couldn't help but say. This was the first time she came to the Sunluo Ghost region. It was inevitable that she was a little excited. Nyetian nodded slightly. His figure moved and came to the ground in the blink of an eye. The Sunluo Ghost region was different from other cities. There were no city gates, and anyone could enter at will. However, this place was notorious. Obviously, not many people were willing to enter. If it wasn't for the Ghost King's wedding, there probably wouldn't be so many people coming to the Sunluo Ghost region. Nyetian and Mo Ihan came to a dense forest at the edge. As they continued to walk forward, they could see sparse, dilapidated buildings. Brother Nyetian, wait a moment. At this time, Emoihan suddenly spoke. Then, she unsheathed the longsword on her back. A sword aura rushed into the sky, turned into a dazzling sword shadow, and disappeared in the sky. Nyetian smiled faintly and said, "This is the way you communicate with each other, right?" Emoihan smiled slightly and said, "Second uncle saw my signal and will come soon." Nyetian nodded and smiled. He didn't speak any more and waited attentively. When Emoihan's second uncle appeared, he would separate from the two sisters. He wasn't used to traveling with others. Nyetian and the others waited for a long time, but no one came. Strange, did second uncle not see my signal? A puzzled look appeared on Emoihan's pretty face. She raised the sword in her hand again, wanting to release another signal. Wait. Right at this time, Nyetian suddenly waved his hand and stopped Emoihan. What's wrong? Emoihan was startled. She looked around but did not find anything strange. Someone's coming. Nyetian frowned and said in a deep voice. Emoihan frowned slightly and looked around again. Still, she did not see anyone. Nyetian spread out his divine sense and sensed several figures approaching them at an extremely fast speed. His expression couldn't help but darken as he asked, "Miss Mo, how many people are with your second uncle?" Emoihan frowned. She didn't know what Nyetian had discovered, so she said in confusion, "Second uncle is alone. There is no one else with him." Nyetian could not help but frown, and his face immediately became gloomy. At this moment, he sensed at least 7 or 8 figures madly rushing towards them. Moreover, they were all carrying a very terrifying killing intent. Killing intent. Emoihan was a sword-bone swordsman, so her perception was not bad. She immediately felt that something was wrong and could not help but exclaim, "Leave this place!" Nyetian roared. Astral soul wings appeared on his back as he prepared to leave immediately. Emoihan nodded in response and immediately rushed forward with Emo Lingshan in tow. Bang! However, just as the three of them ran for about 1,000 meters, the ground in front of them suddenly exploded. A figure actually drilled out from the ground. "People from the Emo clan, since you have come to the Sunluo ghost region, do you still want to run?" The figure that drilled out from the ground was a short and skinny cultivator. He was only the size of a 7 or 8-year-old child, but his entire body's aura was very strong, and his killing intent was heavy. Nyetian's eyes narrowed slightly. From the other party's tone, it seemed that he was an enemy of the Emo clan. "Who are you? I don't even know you." Emoihan's beautiful eyes flickered, and there was a trace of panic in her voice. "It doesn't matter if you don't know me, as long as your surname is Mo," the short and skinny cultivator said coldly. Then, his figure moved. His footwork was very strange, as though he was flying close to the ground. He directly dashed towards Emoihan. "Be careful!" Nyetian roared. This short and skinny cultivator had the strength of a mid-stage high god. He was not someone that Emoihan could handle. Boom! Without hesitation, Nyetian struck out with his sword. The vast and mighty sword shadow landed on the ground, directly shattering the ground. Endless amounts of sand and stones were sent flying. The short and skinny cultivator was caught off guard. His body trembled, and he was actually sent flying by the sword chi. However, his figure was very agile. He was actually like a monkey climbing on a giant tree. "Brat, you are not a member of the Emo clan. Don't meddle in other people's business." The short and skinny cultivator sized up Nyetian with his sharp eyes. His expression sank slightly. Clearly, he did not expect Nyetian's strength to be so valiant. His sword strike actually contained such power. "I don't care what grudges you have with the Emo clan. These two ladies are my friends. I can't just ignore them," Nyetianling replied coldly. He sensed that the person behind him was getting closer and closer. "It seems that you are hell-bent on courting death." The short cultivator sneered. Then, his figure moved. His entire body turned into a disc that spun rapidly in the air. Immediately, countless sharp blades flew in the air, blotting out the sky as they bombarded towards Nyetian. Nyetian's eyes couldn't help but narrow. He had never seen anyone use such a strange martial technique. He could feel that the sharp blades in the air were very sharp and had great destructive power. They should not be underestimated. Nyetian did not dare to be careless. He activated the Astral Soul Shield, protecting the Mo sisters first. Then, his figure moved. Sword intent surged out of his body. He slashed down with his sword, and a vast sword shadow whistled out, bombarding towards the short cultivator. With one sword strike, countless sharp blades were destroyed. The violent sword intent turned into surging waves of chi, pressing towards the short cultivator. The short cultivator was surprised. Then, his eyes trembled. Only now did he know how terrifying Nyetian was. He hurriedly dodged, but he was still a step too late. His body was swept by the sword shadow, and he was directly sent flying. He smashed into a giant tree, and the several meters thick trunk was pierced through. "Brat, your strength is very strange." The short cultivator steadied himself and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He looked at Nyetian with a deep fear in his eyes. The two sword strikes just now were warnings. If you don't scram, the next sword strike will take your life. Nyetianling replied coldly. His eyes were filled with a strong killing intent. His entire person seemed gloomy and cold. What a terrifying killing intent! The short cultivator's heart trembled. He couldn't help but exclaim in shock. After which, his silhouette flickered, and he directly left, leaving behind a voice in the air. "Take good care of the people behind you." Nyetian stared at the silhouette of the short cultivator, and couldn't help but feel a little strange. This person's martial technique was indeed somewhat strange. And at this moment the people behind him also arrived. Numerous silhouettes descended from the sky, directly surrounding Nyetian and his two companions. The surging killing intent permeated the air, as though it was real, causing people to feel suffocated. Nyetian's expression sank. He glanced at the surrounding cultivators, and his gaze locked onto a certain silhouette. "Cold," he said. "Duguanai, it's you." Chapter 1634. Duguanai. When Nyetian saw that Duguanai was among the cultivators surrounding him, he could not help but frown and exclaim in surprise. He didn't expect to meet Duguanai here. Nyetian. Duguanai was even more surprised when he saw Nyetian. Nyetian's appearance seemed to have changed a little. His whole person seemed to be sharper than before. When he sensed Nyetian's strength, the surprise in his eyes became even more intense. However, Duguanai's self-control was very strong. He suppressed the shock in his heart and said in a deep voice, "Nyetian, I didn't expect your strength to improve so fast. I'm amazed." "Duguanai, your strength also improved quickly. It seems that you have perfectly integrated with Shui Wushuang's sage arm." Nyetian calmed down at this moment. He fixed his eyes on Duguanai's arm and said in a cold voice. Duguanai's strength had reached the late stage of midgod, the same as Nyetian. Duguanai's strength improved at a speed beyond Nyetian's expectation. It was indeed very terrifying. Nyetian had a powerful trump card, and so did Duguanai. He had the 100 virtual body and the 8th other pupil, the Eye of Devil's Night. Now that he had integrated with Shui Wushuang's sage arm, his strength was probably even stronger. "Big brother Nyetian, do you know this person?" When Emoihan saw that Nyetian and Duguanai actually knew each other, she couldn't help but look cold. There was a trace of hesitation in her expression. Obviously, she was suspicious of Nyetian. "An old rival," Nyetian answered indifferently, his face expressionless. "Nyetian, I really admire you. You are always surrounded by beautiful women." Duguanai smiled coldly and fixed his cold eyes on Emoihan. He said in a deep voice, "But you can't protect this girl. Let me give you a free piece of advice. If you don't want to get into trouble, leave quickly. Nietion's eyes slightly narrowed. He said in a deep voice, You want me to leave? Do you think it's possible? Humph. Duguanai smiled sinisterly and said in a cold voice, Nietion, since you don't want to leave, then don't blame me. Attack. All of a sudden, the 8 black-robed men unleashed their killing intent, condensed it into a formidable aura, and charged towards Nietion. You think you can kill me? You're not qualified. Nietion let out a low roar and released all of his sword momentum. Like a sharp sword, he soared into the sky. The surging momentum was extremely frightening, and he forcibly broke through the oncoming momentum. At the same time, he moved and stabbed his sword. The sharp and cold sword went straight for one of the black-clothed martial artists. Danger! All the men in black were stunned. They immediately felt the danger and screamed. They obviously didn't expect Nietion to be so strong. Even under the joint attack of 7 or 8 superior gods, he could still forcefully break through and even counterattack. Boom! The frightening sword shot out. The martial artist in black didn't have time to react. His flesh and blood splattered everywhere. He died on the spot. The sudden turn of events caused the black-robed man to go blank. Unconcealable fear appeared in his eyes as he looked at Nietion. Is this all you've got? What a mess! Nietion took a step forward. He was extremely powerful. The sword momentum around him spread out for thousands of meters, forcing the men in black to retreat. After killing one of the men in black with one sword, the others became obviously frightened. They hesitated and didn't dare to move forward. Nietion, do you really want to protect these 2 girls? Seeing this, Duguanai couldn't help but frown and ask coldly. Of course. Nietionling replied indifferently. He said in a deep voice, With me here, don't even think about hurting a hair on these 2 girls. Nietion, you're still the same as when you were in the heaven realm. You still like to show off. Do you think you can protect them with your strength? Duguanai's eyes were extremely gloomy. He seemed to be thinking about something. He said, You don't even know who wants to kill them? Do I need to know? Nietionling replied coldly. His eyes were domineering and fierce. He didn't care who Duguanai worked for. He would protect the Mo sisters. Arrogant! Duguanai roared. His eyes were full of killing intent. He didn't hesitate anymore. His whole body released the billowing 100 void chi. The 100 void boundary was instantly opened. At the same time, he roared, Nietion, you and I didn't have the chance to fight in the competition of the 12 shrines. Today let's fight to the death. As Duguanai's strength increased, the suppression of the 100 void boundary became even more terrifying. He was confident that within the 100 void boundary, Nietion was absolutely no match for him. Nietion, today, I'll let you see how powerful the sage's arm is in my hands. Duguanai seemed to have gone crazy. He stretched out his arm and a golden light shone. At the same time, he fused the 100 void chi with a punch. Suddenly, a golden fist shadow surged with black chi and crazily pressed down on Nietion. The golden fist shadow was extremely powerful. Everywhere it passed, the ground was torn apart. The wind and clouds roared and the sky changed color. Nietion frowned. The fist shadow was not visible, but he could already feel the strong wind blowing towards him. It was like a sharp blade that could tear everything apart. Facing Duguanai's crazy punch, Nietion's face was as calm as still water. What gushed out of his eyes was not fear but a strong desire to fight. Since Duguanai wanted to fight, Nietion wouldn't be afraid. Boom! The corner of Nietion's mouth twitched into a cold smile. Then, the 9 dragon veins in his body revolved crazily. Waves of dragon chi were released and surged in the air. It was very terrifying. Feeling Nietion's chi, Duguanai's eyes couldn't help but darken. He seemed to feel that something was wrong and was very surprised. Roar! In the next moment, a giant golden dragon appeared in the endless dragon chi. It raised its head and roared at the sky. The dragon's roar shook the heavens and the earth. The moment the giant golden dragon appeared, everyone felt a wild pressure coming towards them. They felt a tightness in their chests, as if they were about to suffocate. The crowd retreated and looked at Nyetian and Duguanai in fear. They didn't expect the two to be so terrifying. Boom! In the next moment, the golden fist shadow and the giant golden dragon collided. An explosion sounded in the air and waves of chi spread out. Everything within a few thousand meters was directly crushed. Chi chi chi. Violent explosions sounded continuously. The two huge forces collided with each other as if they wanted to tear each other apart. Emoihan and Emo Lingshan hid tens of thousands of meters away and watched the violent scene from afar. Her eyes couldn't help but tremble violently. At this moment, she realized that she had greatly underestimated Nyetian's battle strength. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have believed that this level of collision actually happened between two intermediate deities. Even a late-stage advanced deity or even a peak high god might not have such terrifying battle strength. Roar! At this moment, the dragon aura around the crimson golden dragon exploded again. With a roar, violent dragon aura surged and turned into rolling airwaves that pressed forward. The golden fist shadow couldn't withstand it anymore and collapsed. Then, endless dragon chi rushed towards Duguanai like a raging sea. Chapter 1635. Boom! In the air, Duguani's figure was engulfed by the raging dragon energy and disappeared without a trace. The sudden scene caused everyone to suck in a breath of cold air, and their gazes began to tremble. Even though Duguanai was so powerful, he was still defeated by Nyetian. Nyetian's figure stood in the air and his eyes were shining. He said coldly, "Duguanai, don't hide anymore. Come out." Everyone was stunned as they looked at the void filled with dragon chi. "Nyetian, you are really powerful. I have underestimated you." The void trembled slightly and a figure came out from the dragon energy. It was Duguanai. Duguanai was covered in blood and he looked very embarrassed. However, his eyes were fierce and his aura was very stable. "You are also very powerful. You can actually block an attack from my sovereign dragon blood." Nyetian laughed and replied coldly. Sovereign dragon blood, after being enhanced by the 3 forbidden skills, was at least several times more powerful than before. Even an expert at the peak of the high-level deity stage would not be able to withstand the attack just now. However, Duguanai easily withstood it. It was enough to show how powerful he was. Duguanai looked very embarrassed, but he was not seriously injured. It was just a flesh wound, which was not painful or itchy. "Nyetian, I am very curious. Why is your sovereign dragon blood able to ignore the weakening of the 100 virtual body?" Duguani's eyes were filled with killing intent. The blood on his body gradually dispersed, and he spoke in a deep voice. He had obviously activated the 100 virtual boundary. Why was Nyetian's sovereign dragon blood still so terrifying? It seemed that it was not affected by the 100 virtual body at all. Duguanai remembered that Nyetian's sovereign dragon blood could not resist the 100 virtual boundary previously. He could feel that Nyetian's supreme dragon vein had indeed become stronger, but it was definitely not strong enough to ignore the 100 virtual body. "Duguanai, do you think you're the only one with a barrier?" Nyetianling sneered, his eyes filled with disdain. The reason why the supreme dragon vein wasn't suppressed by the 100 void barrier was because Nyetian had activated the forbidden space barrier. He knew that Duguanai was not an ordinary martial artist, so he didn't dare to be careless. As it turned out, Nyetian was very wise. If he hadn't activated the forbidden space galaxy, he would have suffered a great loss in the previous collision. Sage Duguani's arm combined with the power of the 100 void body was extremely strong. If Shao Chen only used the supreme dragon bloodline, he would not be able to resist it. One had to admit that the sage's arm was indeed more powerful in Duguani's hands than in Shui Wushuang's. Duguanai was a freak. Nye Tian, I really underestimated you. Duguni's eyes darkened. He immediately sensed the existence of the forbidden space barrier. Then he looked at Emoihan and said, You've protected the lives of these two girls. But how long can you protect them? You don't even know who wants to kill them. If you go against those people, you will only end up with one thing, death. Duguni's eyes were sharp, and his aura gradually converged. His skinny figure stood in the air like a skeleton. How to protect them is my business. You don't need to worry about it, Nye Tianling responded coldly. He was very arrogant. Humph. Duguanai sneered and shook his head slightly. He turned around and said to the people behind him, Let's go. Those cultivators obviously obeyed Duguanai. They turned around and left without hesitation. Nye Tian, I hope we will have a chance to meet again. Before Duguanai left, he smiled cold. Then, his figure flashed and disappeared into the void. There will definitely be. Nye Tian looked at Duguani's back, and the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile as he spoke coldly. This time, he didn't have a life-and-death battle with Duguanai because he felt that it was not the right time. The Mo sisters were present. If others attacked them while he was fighting with Duguanai, it would be troublesome. Nye Tian was not sure about Duguani's strength. It should be known that Duguanai had not used the Eye of the Devil's Night yet. If the two of them had a life-and-death battle, it would definitely be a fierce one. It would not be easy for Nye Tian to kill Duguanai. This person is quite strong. His trump card is also very strong. At this time, the fat cat's voice rang out. It smiled playfully and said, Apart from you, he is the most monstrous person I have ever seen. Nye Tian frowned and couldn't help but laugh. He said, This person is an old opponent of mine in the higher planes. I have fought with him many times. Although I always gained the upper hand, I was unable to kill him. It's not bad to have such an opponent. He can make you feel pressured. The fat cat smiled and disappeared. Duguanai was indeed a strong opponent. Fortunately, Nye Tian's strength had increased fast enough. Otherwise, it would be hard to say who would win this battle. Big brother Nye Tian, are you all right? The Mo sisters walked over and asked worriedly. I'm fine. Nye Tian smiled faintly. His expression was calm. Big brother Nye Tian, I'm sorry. I doubted you just now. Emoihan looked at Nye Tian and said embarrassedly, It's not your fault to be on guard. Nye Tian laughed. He had noticed it before. Because he knew Duguanai, Emoihan thought that he and Duguanai were on the same side. However, this was nothing. Anyone would have suspected it. Miss Mo, why are these people chasing after you? Nye Tian became cold. He thought for a while and couldn't help but ask. First, the strange short cultivator appeared. Then, Duguanai and the others appeared. They all came for the Mo sisters. Moreover, they all wanted to kill them. This made Nye Tian very confused. Emoihan couldn't help but feel awkward, as if she had something she couldn't say. Her gaze inadvertently fell on Mo Lingshan. Nye Tian observed Emoihan's reaction. He couldn't help but look at Mo Lingshan. He wondered in his heart, is there something strange about this little girl called Shan? Nye Tian felt Mo Lingshan's body with his divine sense. He didn't find anything strange. He couldn't help but feel even more confused. Nye Tian, there is something wrong with this little girl called Shan. At this time, Fat Cat's voice sounded again. There was a strange look in her eyes. What's wrong? Nye Tian stared blankly for a moment. For the little fat cat to have such a reaction, Mo Lingshan definitely had something amazing on her. Big brother Nye Tian, actually, Shanra and I came to Sunluo Ghost Domain too. Before Fat Cat could say anything, Emoihan opened her mouth. She seemed to have hesitated for a long time and finally wanted to tell the truth. Ihan. At this moment, a furious roar suddenly rang out in the air, directly interrupting Emoihan. Afterwards, a figure appeared in the sky and landed beside Emoihan immediately. Nye Tian's gaze changed slightly. He looked at the person. It was a middle-aged man. His facial features were resolute, and his eyes were sharp. He could tell with a single glance that he was a vicious person. Late over God. Nye Tian could not help but cry out inside after sensing the middle-aged man's strength. He was extremely shocked. He had never thought that the middle-aged man would actually be so powerful. He had reached late over God. Only the palace masters of the divine palace possessed such strength. Second uncle. Emoihan called out in surprise and joy when she saw the middle-aged man. She was clearly extremely happy. Second uncle, why have you only just come? Emo Lingshan looked at the middle-aged man and asked innocently. Chapter 1636. The middle-aged man suddenly looked at Nye Tian and seemed to notice something. A strong killing intent surged around him. Nye Tian felt the killing intent and couldn't help but frown. This middle-aged man was Emoihan and Emo Lingshan's second uncle, Emo Yanwei. Second uncle, he is Nye Tian. He is a new friend that Shan and I met on the divine boat. If it wasn't for big brother Nye Tian, Shan and I would have been in danger. Emoihan also noticed Emo Yanwei's strange expression and quickly explained. Emo Yanwei's face was gloomy as if he didn't hear Emoihan. He looked away from Nye Tian and said, "Let's go." Second uncle. Seeing that Emo Yanwei had turned around, Emoihan couldn't help but frown. She looked slightly embarrassed and looked at Nye Tian apologetically, not knowing what to say. "Miss Emo, goodbye." Nye Tian's reaction was very calm as he said with a faint smile. "Big brother Nye Tian, goodbye." Emoihan smiled awkwardly and left with Emo Yanwei. Nye Tian looked at the backs of the three of them and couldn't help but laugh. He murmured, "Did I do something wrong? Why is this guy so hostile?" Emo Yanwei was very hostile to Nye Tian. If Emoihan hadn't explained, this guy would probably have attacked. Nye Tian also couldn't understand why Emo Yanwei was so hostile to him. "Nye Tian, don't bother about them. Let's go." At this time, Fat Cat's voice sounded, and it seemed a little excited. "Fat, you just said that Emo Lingshan is not right. What is wrong?" Nye Tian suddenly thought of Fat Cat's reaction and couldn't help but ask. Also, Emoihan obviously wanted to say something but was interrupted by Emo Yanwei, who suddenly rushed over. "That little girl has already been taken away by her second uncle. Don't worry about her. Just focus on your own matters." Fat Cat chuckled. He did not want to tell Nye Tian about Emo Lingshan. Nye Tian smiled bitterly. Since Fat Cat didn't want to tell him, there was nothing he could do. In any case, Emo Lingshan had a second uncle with the strength of a main god, so there was no need for him to worry. Moreover, that second uncle was very hostile towards him, so there was no need for him to get involved. Nye Tian no longer thought about the Emo sisters and immediately went to the Sunluo Ghost domain. Sunluo Ghost Realm was surrounded by an endless dark forest. There were two main cities in the central region, Sunluo City and Ghost King City. The two cities were very close to each other and were connected to each other. A moment later, Nye Tian's figure appeared at the junction between Sunluo City and Guiwang City. He looked at the two cities and finally decided to go to Guiwang City first. Originally, Nye Tian wanted to go to Sunluo City, but because of the Ghost King's wedding, he had to go to Guiwang City first. He had a faint premonition that the 72nd wife that the Ghost King Palace Lord was going to marry was very likely to be Rui Qianyu. Nye Tian entered Guiwang City and strolled on the wide street. This place was not much different from other cities. It was also very lively and bustling. However, the warriors here did not seem very friendly. It gave people a kind of oppressive feeling, as if someone would suddenly attack you in the next moment. Nye Tian asked around and found out that the Ghost King's wedding was in half a month. 3 days later, the Ghost King Arena would open and the Ghost King would appear in person. There were still 3 days before the Ghost King Arena started, so Nye Tian was not in a hurry. Next, Nye found a restaurant and asked for a room. He was going to rest for 3 days while waiting for the Ghost King arena to start. Nye, since you have nothing to do now, go out for a walk. Maybe your luck is good and you can find some news about the 7-leaf dragon's tongue orchid. Fat Cat said to Nye with a faint smile. All right. Nye nodded and smiled, then left the room. Nye asked around and found out that the biggest herb market in Guiwang City was the Ghost King Herbal Garden. He decided to go there to try his luck. Not long after, Nye figure appeared in front of a strange building. Ghost King Herbal Garden, it's here. Nye looked at the building in front of him and said with a faint smile, Ghost King Herbal Garden covers the whole world. I wonder how my luck will be. The Ghost King Herbal Garden was very famous in Guiwang City. It was said to cover the whole world. There was even a saying in Guiwang City, there is no herb that can't be found in the Ghost King Herbal Garden. The Ghost King Herbal Garden's exterior was very strange. It looked like a hand that drilled out from the ground, grabbing towards the sky, giving people a very fierce feeling. Nye didn't hesitate and directly entered the herbal garden. The Ghost King Herbal Garden's people were also dressed very strangely, all wearing ghost masks and black clothes, looking a bit gloomy. Mister, how can I help you? Just as he stepped into the herbal garden's hall, a sweet voice sounded, then a small figure appeared in front of Nye wearing a ghost mask. This was obviously a young girl, even though she was dressed in black. One could still see the girl's exquisite figure. Nye looked at the other party, smiled and said, I want to buy some herbs. Okay, please follow me. The ghost-masked girl smiled and led the way. Under the ghost-masked girl's guidance, Nye looked through all 5 halls of the Ghost King Herbal Garden, but couldn't find the 7-leaf dragon's tongue orchid. Mister, is there no herb you need here? The ghost-masked girl seemed a little impatient. Her voice was a lot colder. No. Nye smiled faintly. His reaction was very calm. He directly took out a lesser godhead and threw it to the ghost-masked girl, saying, Thank you. The ghost-masked girl was stunned. She didn't expect Nye to be so generous, actually taking out a lesser godhead as a tip. Mister, what herb do you need? Tell Little Butterfly will definitely help you find it. Seeing Nye being so generous, the ghost-masked girl's attitude immediately changed 180 degrees, becoming incomparably enthusiastic. Forget it, your Ghost King Herbal Garden is just a name, it doesn't have the herbs I need. The Ghost King Herbal Garden's so-called covering the whole world is just a joke. Nye brows twitched slightly, a faint smile on his face, but his voice was very loud, resounding in the hall. As he spoke, his gaze inadvertently fell on a dark corner. This Little Butterfly was stunned for a moment, seemingly a little embarrassed. This was the first time someone commented on the Ghost King Herbal Garden like this. As soon as Nye voice fell, the surrounding people all looked at him strangely. So blatantly calling the Ghost King Herbal Garden a joke, wasn't this a provocation? Behind the Ghost King Herbal Garden was the Ghost King's celestial palace. Nye was simply courting death by doing this. Old fart still not coming out? However, Nye didn't pay attention to the others. He stepped forward and prepared to leave, at the same time looking at the dark corner, secretly laughing in his heart. He had long noticed that ever since he entered the Ghost King Herbal Garden, there had been a pair of eyes staring at him from the dark, secretly observing his every move. The reason why he said it so blatantly was to force the person behind him to come out. As Nye walked down step by step, his heart was actually a little nervous. Wait! At this time, an old and low voice sounded, and a skinny figure walked out from the dark corner. Chapter 1637. Nye looked at the scrawny old man. When he saw the latter's face clearly, his eyes couldn't help but tremble in shock. The scrawny old man stood there like a withered tree branch that could be blown away by a gust of wind. This scrawny old man didn't wear a ghost mask, instead, his face was exposed. The scrawny old man's face was the scrawny old man's. It was riddled with holes, so much so that one could even see the white bones of his face. It was an extremely frightening sight. Nye Tian didn't expect this old man to look like this. Manor Lord. The girl named Xiao Dai was frightened when she saw the scrawny old man. She screamed and bowed deeply, not daring to look at him. The surrounding people also lowered their heads, showing their utmost respect. In the entire hall, only Nye Tian looked directly at the scrawny old man's face without any hesitation. This scrawny old man was the Ghost King Herb Manor's Manor Lord, Gui Shanquan. Apart from being the Manor Lord, Gui Shanquan also had another identity, one of the two deputy palace lords of the Ghost King Palace. Old mister, is there anything I can help you with? Nye Tian regained his composure and looked at Gui Shanquan with a faint smile. This old man is the Manor Lord, Gui Shanquan. Earlier, you said that the Ghost King Herb Manor has everything under the heavens was a joke. This old man hopes that you can take back your word. Gui Shanquan said in a deep voice. His voice was like a sigh from hell, giving off an extremely gloomy feeling. Although Gui Shanquan didn't release any aura, and even his eyes were calm, his words made people feel a strong sense of oppression. He was the Manor Lord, so of course he wouldn't allow others to tarnish the manor's reputation. Manor Lord, I'm afraid I can't take back my words. Nye Tian's reaction was very calm. He smiled faintly and said, I've looked through all 5 halls of the Ghost King Herb Manor, but I couldn't find the herbs I needed. Saying that the Ghost King Herb Manor has everything under the heavens, if this isn't a joke, then what is? His calm voice resounded in the hall, but it was like a sudden clap of thunder, causing everyone to stiffen. Nye Tian didn't show the slightest bit of fear when facing Gui Shanquan. This courage was too terrifying. Everyone felt that Nye Tian was either a fool or a madman. Huh! Gui Shanquan's gaze suddenly tightened. He did not expect Nye Tian to have such a reaction. There was a strange look in his eyes, but he held it in. After all, there were so many people watching. If he were to make a move directly, it would damage the reputation of the Herbal Manor. Since you said that the Ghost King Herbal Manor doesn't have the herbs you need, then please tell me the herbs. This old man will personally help you find them. Gui Shanquan suppressed the anger in his heart and said coldly. Sure. Nye Tian smiled playfully and said directly, I need the 7-leaf dragon's tongue orchid. Please help me find it, Villa Lord. 7-leaf agave orchid. Hearing Nye Tian's words, everyone stared blankly because they had never heard of this medicinal ingredient before. They were all confused. 7-leaf agave orchid. Gui Shanquan was also stunned when he heard this name. However, his expression was clearly different from the others. It wasn't confusion, but shock. Everyone saw that Gui Shanquan was also stunned. They couldn't help but look at Nye Tian and started discussing. What nonsense is this kid talking about? What 7-leaf agave orchid? Right. I've lived for so long, but I've never heard of 7-leaf agave orchid. This kid must have made up this name. This kid is here to cause trouble. This kid must have eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's gall. He actually dared to come to the Ghost King Herbal Manor to cause trouble. He's simply courting death. As the crowd discussed among themselves, the way they looked at Nye Tian became even more vicious. All of you, shut up. Just as everyone was happily talking, Gui Shanquan suddenly roared. His whole body released a cold aura that enveloped the entire hall. Everyone felt a strong oppressive force and a feeling of suffocation in their chests. They quickly shut their mouths and lowered their heads, not daring to move or speak. Nye Tian was completely unafraid of Gui Shanquan's aura. The corner of his mouth curled into a faint smile, and he said provocatively, Villa Lord, can you help me find the 7-leaf agave orchid? If you can't find it, isn't the Ghost King Herbal Manor's reputation of covering the whole world just a joke? You! Gui Shanquan's old face tightened. His wrinkled face looked even more ferocious. Villa Lord, if you have nothing else to say, then I'll take my leave. Nye Tian smiled faintly and turned around to leave. Gui Shanchuan's strength was at the peak of high god. This person was clearly not a battle-type warrior. He should be a very high-ranked god alchemist. With Nye Tian's current battle strength, as long as he wasn't a lord god expert, he could leave safely. Wait! Just as Nye Tian turned around, Gui Shanchuan's voice sounded again. He said cold, "Did I say that I can't find the seven-leaf agave orchid?" Nye Tian's figure froze. His expression couldn't help but change. He exclaimed in his heart, "The Ghost King Herbal Manor really has the seven-leaf agave orchid." Nye Tian suddenly turned around. His eyes flashed with a blazing divine light. He said, "Villa Lord, with your status, you wouldn't lie to me, would you?" "Why would I lie to you?" Gui Shanquan replied cold. He then said, "Please follow me." Nye Tian was taken aback for a moment, and then hesitated. He was a little worried. If Gui Shanquan brought him into a killing formation, then it would be troublesome. No matter how he looked at it, Gui Shanquan was not a good person. "Don't worry, I'm not as despicable as you think." Gui Shanquan could tell what Nye Tian was thinking. He said cold with a calm face, "Nye Tian, follow him." Fat Cat was also very excited. She urged Nye Tian. "Okay." Nye Tian nodded and followed Gui Shanquan. A moment later, Gui Shanquan and Nye Tian came to a long passage. Before entering the passage, Nye Tian felt a bone-chilling cold. He saw that the passage in front was actually sealed by mysterious ice. The cold air in the space was unusually strong. "Follow me," Gui Shanquan said and stepped into the passageway. Nye Tian also did not hesitate and entered the mysterious ice passage. The mysterious ice passage was thousands of meters long. The deeper one went, the colder it got. Fortunately, Nye Tian's martial body was strong. He didn't care about this kind of cold. "It's here." Gui Shanquan came to the end of the mysterious ice passage. In front of him was an ice room made of the coldest mysterious ice. Nye Tian saw a blue light surging through the ice room. It was very strange. Gui Shanquan made a hand seal. The door of the ice room slowly opened. He looked back at Nye Tian and said, "Please?" Nye Tian was stunned. Without hesitation, he stepped into the ice room. As soon as he stepped into the ice room, the scene that greeted his eyes caused Nye Tian to freeze in place. In the room, an ice-blue flower floated in the air. It bloomed layer by layer, releasing a dreamlike ice-blue halo that filled the whole room. The ice-blue flower was crystal clear. The 7 leaves were hanging in the air like 7 tentacles. They were thin and transparent. It was extremely beautiful. "This is..." Nye Tian looked at the ice-blue flower in front of him. He was stunned for a full 10 seconds. Chapter 1638. Inside the ice room, Nye Tian and Fat Cat's voices rang out at the same time. Nye Tian had never imagined that Gui Shanquan would actually bring him to the 7-leaf agave orchid. After a long time, Nye Tian finally calmed down, and his expression softened a lot. At this time, Gui Shanquan entered the ice room, and the door suddenly closed. "Huh!" Nye Tian's eyes narrowed, and his expression darkened. Gui Shanquan wouldn't kill him in the ice room, would he? But Nye Tian wasn't afraid. Gui Shanquan only had the strength of a peak high god, and he wasn't a battle-type martial artist. If they really fought, Nye Tian would definitely be able to kill him in a second. "Little brother, how should I address you?" Gui Shanquan suddenly looked at Nye Tian, and his tone and voice had changed to become very gentle. Nye Tian was stunned. Gui Shanchuan's change caught him off guard. "My name is Nye Tian." Nye Tian frowned and said indifferently, "Nye Tian, good name." Gui Shanquan smiled, and there was a hint of slyness in his eyes. "Villa Lord, if you have something to say, just say it." Nye Tian couldn't stand Gui Shanchuan's sudden change, and said cold. Gui Shanquan looked at Nye Tian and let out a long sigh and said, I didn't expect to see a god-devil nascent embryo body here. Nie Tian's eyes trembled when he heard Gui Shanchuan's words, and he was very surprised. The aura of his god-devil nascent embryo was concealed by the colored glass energy, and even a paramount god wouldn't be able to detect it. But Gui Shanquan was able to. This was too strange. No wonder Gui Shanquan had been secretly observing Nie Tian ever since he entered the Ghost King herbal manor. It turned out that he had discovered the god-devil nascent embryo. Villa Lord, what do you want? Nie Tianling said coldly, and his eyes were filled with coldness. If Gui Shanquan threatened him with the secret of the god-devil nascent embryo, he would definitely kill him. Don't be nervous, I won't reveal the secret of the fiend god nascent embryo. I just want to make a deal with you. Gui Shanquan smiled faintly, his eyes as deep as water. Speak. Nie Tian didn't waste any time and spoke coldly. Nie Tian, you've already seen the seven-leaf agave. Gui Shanchuan's expression turned serious as he said, you must have a good understanding of this herb, since you came for the seven-leaf agave orchid. As for how valuable it is, I won't say any more. As long as you can help me obtain one thing, not only will I not reveal the secret of the fiend god nascent embryo, I will even give you the seven-leaf dragon's tongue orchid. How about it? After that, Gui Shanquan looked at Nie Tian with a sharp glint in his eyes. What is it? Nie Tian asked in a cold tone. The opposing blood pills recipe. Gui Shanchuan's eyes flickered as he said in a heavy tone. Huh! Nie Tian was stunned. He didn't expect Gui Shanquan to want a recipe. You don't need to know what the opposing blood pill is. As long as you help me obtain the recipe, I will give you the seven-leaf dragon's tongue orchid. Gui Shanquan said in a deep voice, his eyes filled with desire. Nie Tian frowned and looked puzzled. He didn't know what the opposing blood pill's recipe was, that it was worth Gui Shanchuan's seven-leaf dragon's tongue orchid. You're a medicine slave! Just at this moment, a strange cry suddenly rang out, and then the little fat cat's figure appeared on Nie Tian's shoulder, its huge blue eyes staring straight at Gui Shanquan. What is this thing? Gui Shanquan was startled by the fat cat and couldn't help but scream. I'm a nine-tailed chinchilla. I'm not a thing. Fat cat chuckled, then looked at Gui Shanquan playfully and said, You're a medicine slave. Someone used the opposing blood pill and planted the opposing blood evil seal on your body, right? You. Gui Shanquan was stunned. His eyes were filled with astonishment and he said, How did you know? You're a medicine slave. Nie Tian was also stunned. He didn't react for a long time. He was an alchemist, so of course he knew what a medicine slave was. The so-called medicine slave was a person who helped alchemists test medicines. This kind of person's body was very strange, and they could test the medicinal properties of various medicines. Nie Tian never thought that the dignified Ghost King Herbal Garden's master was actually a medicine slave. I want to know. Fat Cat looked at Gui Shanquan, chuckled and said, The opposing blood pill doesn't feel good, right? Fortunately, you have the seven-leaf dragon's tongue orchid to extend your life. Otherwise, you wouldn't have survived until today. You want to know the opposing blood pill's recipe because you want to use it to deduce the cure, right? Gui Shanchuan's eyes widened. He didn't expect Fat Cat to know everything. If this was really sensed, then Fat Cat's perceptive ability was too terrifying. Hearing this, Nie Tian also understood. The reason why Gui Shanchuan's face was full of holes was because of the opposing blood pill's poison. In order to save himself, he needed the opposing blood pill's recipe. Only with the recipe could he think of a cure. But Nie Tian was very curious. With Gui Shanchuan's identity, who could make him take the opposing blood pill? How can I get the opposing blood pill's recipe? Nie Tian became cold and asked. The Ghost King Arena. Gui Shanchuan's eyes trembled and said, In 3 days, the Ghost King Arena will open. As long as you can defeat the Ghost King Palace's warriors, you can ask the Ghost King Palace's master for the opposing blood pills recipe. Nia Tian frowned and said, "It seems that the opposing blood pills recipe is in the hands of the Ghost King Palace's master." "Yes." Gui Shanquan nodded helplessly. At this time, Nia Tian finally understood. The person who made Gui Shanquan take the opposing blood pill was none other than his boss, the Ghost King Palace's master. The Ghost King Palace's master must have made him take the opposing blood pill in order to better control Gui Shanquan. This was a method commonly used by black-bellied bosses to control their subordinate. It was very useful, but Gui Shanquan didn't want to be controlled anymore, so he wanted to get rid of the opposing blood pill's poison. Nye Tian frowned and couldn't help but laugh, saying, "Even if I defeat the Ghost King Palace's warriors and ask the Ghost King Palace's master for the opposing blood pill, will he really give it to me?" The opposing blood pill could even be controlled by someone like Gui Shanquan. How could the Ghost King Palace's master easily hand it over? "Don't worry, he will definitely give it to you." Gui Shanquan smiled strangely, but very firmly said, "As long as you put forward the conditions to the Ghost King Palace's master, whether he gives you the opposing blood pill or not, I will consider that you have fulfilled the conditions. After that, the 7-leaf dragon's tongue orchid is yours." Nye Tian's eyes narrowed, and he even suspected that he had heard wrong. If the Ghost King Palace's master didn't hand over the opposing blood pill's pill formula, Gui Shanquan wouldn't get anything. But he was still willing to hand over the 7-leaf dragon's tongue orchid, which was too strange. "Okay, it's a deal." At this time, without waiting for Nye Tian to speak, Fat Cat first responded on his behalf and very readily agreed to Gui Shanquan's condition. "It's a deal." Gui Shanquan smiled happily and agreed. "Nye Tian, let's go." Fat Cat smiled, indicating that Nye Tian could leave. "Goodbye." Nye Tian no longer delayed and turned to leave. Gui Shanquan opened the door of the ice room and personally sent Nye Tian away. After leaving the Ghost King Herbal Garden, Nye Tian frowned, puzzled, and couldn't help but ask, "Fat, is there something strange about this Gui Shanquan? Why is he willing to give me the 7-leaf dragon's tongue orchid when I can't get the opposing blood pill's pill formula?" "Don't think too much about it. Let's just prepare for the Ghost King Arena 3 days from now." Little Fat Cat chuckled, looking extremely excited. Chapter 1639. 3 days later, in the Ghost King City's arena. In the center of the arena, the hall that could hold tens of thousands of people was already packed with people. The Ghost King Arena was a grand event before the Ghost King's wedding. No one knew why the Ghost King Palace master would hold a Ghost King Arena before his wedding. Today was the first day of the Ghost King Arena, and everyone wanted to join in the fun. The rules of the Ghost King Arena were very simple. If you felt that you had the strength, you could enter the arena. As long as you could defeat 20 challengers, you would have the chance to fight with the arena master arranged by the Ghost King Palace. If you beat the arena master, you would get a Ghost King order, and then use the Ghost King order to make a request to the Ghost King Palace master. In principle, there were no restrictions on the request, and you could make any request. However, anyone with a bit of brains would act according to their own strength. It was impossible for the Ghost King Palace master to kill people like the Sacred Guild master and the Wind and Cloud Alliance master. There were a total of 3 Ghost King arenas, namely the Lower God Arena, the Middle God Arena, and the Upper God Arena. Anyone could participate in the 3 arenas, because each arena had a powerful restriction. For example, the Lower God Arena had a Lower God restriction. Even if an Upper God entered, his strength would be suppressed to the peak of Lower God. Today, the arena was the Lower God Arena. At this moment, a silver-haired figure appeared outside the Lower God Arena, staring at a martial artist in the arena with sword-like eyes. This silver-haired figure was none other than Nye Tian. "Fat, there's no problem with the arena's restriction, right? Nie Tian looked at the arena below and released his divine sense to sense carefully. He did not find anything abnormal, but he was still worried and asked Fat Cat. No problem. Fat Cat chuckled and said, the restriction suppression is very strong. Unless it's a Lord-level powerhouse, it's impossible to break it. That's good. Nie Tian smiled faintly. The Ghost King Arena did not allow Lord-level powerhouses to participate. It seemed that the people from the Ghost King Palace were very obedient and did not tamper with the restriction. Who else? Just at this moment, the cultivator in the arena roared. His hair and beard stood on end. His entire person was like an enraged lion, extremely insolent. Nie Tian had been watching from the side for a long time. This martial artist was called Liang Shi. His original strength was at the peak of the mid-god stage. However, after entering the arena, his strength was suppressed to that of a peak of the mid-god stage. Liang Shi had already defeated 13 martial artists in a row. He only needed to defeat 7 more martial artists, and he would be qualified to challenge the Ghost King Palace's low god arena lord. The crowd looked at the insolent Liang Shi in the arena, and could not help but discuss. Liang Shi is too shameless. He is a peak god, so he should have gone to the god arena. Why did he come to the demigod arena to join in the fun? There are restrictive spells on the arena. The intermediate deity is only at the peak of the lower deity realm. Liang Shi's battle prowess is terrifying. Why can't he come to the arena of a lower deity? This guy is too violent. The dozens of cultivators who fought with him before were either seriously injured or killed. Who would dare to fight him now? The corner of Nie Tian's mouth couldn't help but twitch as he listened to the crowd's discussion. Although there were restrictive spells on the arena, the stronger martial artists still had some advantages. It could only be said that the advantage was not huge. Let me try. At this moment, an angry roar sounded. Immediately, a figure stepped out of the air and landed on the arena. This person was a late-stage mid-god stage martial artist. He was tall and sturdy, with bulging muscles all over his body. One look and anyone could tell that he was a strength-type martial artist. Bang! The moment this martial artist landed, the entire arena shook, and a layer of earth was stirred up. Go to hell! There were no rules in the Ghost King arena. After that person landed, he roared and immediately attacked. He punched out. Suddenly, a mountain-like fist shadow pressed down on Liang Shi, causing the entire arena to shake. What a strong force! The crowd could feel a strong wind blowing on their faces and couldn't help but exclaim. You overestimate yourself. Facing the huge fist shadow, Liang Shi sneered. Immediately, he struck out with his palm. Wild palm energy bloomed and surged with an incomparably surging momentum. It was not the slightest bit weaker than the fist shadow. Boom! The fist and palm collided. With a loud bang, the arena shook and immediately, billowing waves of air exploded. Under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, the challenger was directly sent flying. He fell to the ground like a pile of mud and couldn't get up again. One palm, just one palm, and Liang Shi finished off his challenger. Trash! Liang Shi glanced at the challenger and roared in an extremely insolent manner. This was the 14th person he had defeated. Next, he only needed to defeat 6 more people, and he could challenge the Ghost King Palace's low god arena lord. Who else? Liang Shi's aura was violent. He suddenly raised his head and looked at the crowd on the spectator stand. He arrogantly said, "You cowards, do you only know how to watch the show from up there? Come down and fight me if you have the guts." The crowd's eyes trembled. For a moment, no one dared to accept the challenge. Liang Shi was too ruthless and powerful. He was really not easy to deal with. Nie Tian looked at the arrogant Liang Shi and couldn't help but shake his head with a smile. Of course, he wasn't afraid of Liang Shi. He just didn't want to make a move. The Ghost King arena had just started. It was only the foreplay now. It was too early to make a move. Moreover, Liang Shi was too weak. Nie Tian had no desire to make a move at all. Even if Nie Tian defeated Liang Shi, he would still have to face the challenges of 19 people. It was really troublesome. A bunch of trash. Liang Shi almost went crazy at this moment. He pointed at the crowd in front of him and cursed. Following that, a few martial artists couldn't bear to watch any longer and stepped into the arena. However, the result was the same as the previous challengers. They were all crippled by Liang Shi with one palm. Nie Tian had long noticed that Liang Shi was a martial artist with the power of bloodline. His martial body was far stronger than the average martial artist. Therefore, very few martial artists of the same strength were his match. By this time, Liang Shi had already won 19 matches. As long as he won one more match, he would be able to fight against a low-god arena lord. Therefore, his entire being became excited, as though he had gone mad, shouting and yelling at the crowd. "You bunch of ants, hurry up and fight me. You're all king cowards. You're all cowards in your mother's womb." Liang Shi cursed crazily and became more and more arrogant. Nie Tian shook his head and smiled bitterly. Such a person was like an idiot. "I'll do it." At this moment, a clear voice sounded. A sword intent pierced through the air. Immediately, a beautiful figure appeared in mid-air. "It's a woman!" Everyone was stunned. They looked at the figure in mid-air and exclaimed in unison. "It's a female swordsman." Someone saw the long sword on the back of the figure in mid-air and was stunned. Emoihan. Nie Tian looked at the figure. It was a very familiar face. Emoihan. He didn't expect Emoihan to appear at this time. Could it be that she has something to ask the Ghost King Palace Lord? Nie Tian frowned and asked doubtfully. Chapter 1640. Emoihan's figure stood in the air above the low god arena. Sword aura surged around her and was extremely sharp. The next moment, she moved and landed on the arena. Her pretty face turned cold as she said, "I'll be your opponent." Liang Shi looked at Emoihan. He was stunned at first, but then he laughed. A strange light flashed in his eyes as he said, "Little girl, you can be my woman, but you're far from being my opponent." Liang Shi's words caused the crowd to roar with laughter. As a woman, Emoihan appeared to be very weak. Adding that she was only at the peak of the low god realm, she seemed even weaker. After being teased by Liang Shi, everyone took her as a joke. "Watch your mouth." Emoihan frowned and said in a cold tone. Her eyes revealed a hint of killing intent. Liang Shi suddenly felt a chilling murderous intent. His expression couldn't help but change as his gaze trembled slightly. However, he was an expert who had experienced hundreds of battles, so he immediately calmed down and said, "Little girl, I don't want to kill a woman. Just admit defeat." "Admit defeat?" Emoihan sneered as if she had heard a joke. "Do you think that's possible? Make your move." The next moment, Emoihan's eyes turned cold. A powerful sword aura soared into the sky. It was as if a sharp sword was lying between heaven and earth. It was extremely terrifying. What a powerful sword essence! The crowd felt the terrifying sword aura. They felt a tightness in their chests, as if they were suffocating. Their faces were filled with terror. No one had expected Emoihan to be so powerful. Just a single sword aura was enough to make people feel suffocated. Emoihan is indeed powerful. Nie Tian smiled faintly when he saw Emoihan's imposing manner. He knew that Emoihan's swordsmanship realm had reached the sword-bone realm. It was no exaggeration to say that Emoihan could completely crush Liang Shi with her swordsmanship alone. "Liang Shi, I'll give you a chance. Admit defeat," Emoihan said in a cold tone as she locked her indifferent gaze on Liang Shi. The same words coming out of Emoihan's mouth were like a loud slap to Liang Shi's face. Only then did Liang Shi realize that the little girl in front of him was so terrifying. "Little girl, you are indeed very strong, but I am also weak." Liang Shi let out a low roar, and a violent aura was released from his body. like an exploding wave, the illusion of a huge golden lion condensed around him. Bloodline power! Emoihan couldn't help knitting her brows when she saw the image of the golden lion behind Liang Shi. Shortly after, her expression turned calm and she said, "That's not enough to defeat me." At this moment, Liang Shi was using the power of his bloodline. He had not used it before because he wanted to use it against the Ghost King Palace's Low God Arena Lord. However, Emoihan's appearance forced him to use his bloodline power. What a strong aura! The crowd cried out again. It turned out that Liang Shi was also very powerful. He had not used his true strength at all. Arrogant! Sensing the disdain in Emoihan's eyes, Liang Shi couldn't help but roar in anger. His silhouette flickered and the golden lion behind him pounced at Emoihan. Boom! In an instant, a vast and oppressive aura roared as if to swallow Emoihan. Liang Shi knew that Emoihan was a rare genius in swordsmanship, so he did not dare to be careless. He wanted to make the first move and seize the initiative. Facing Liang Shi's all-out attack, Emoihan's expression was very calm. The corner of her mouth twitched as she murmured, "One sword to defeat you." Boom! At the moment when the golden lion pounced, Emoihan stabbed out with her sword. Suddenly, the sword momentum around her changed. Endless sword will condensed, and a sword shadow that didn't look very big appeared. It was extremely swift and fierce, like a dragon whistling out. Boom! In midair, the two forces collided. The sword shadow was extremely powerful. It directly pierced through the golden lion's illusion, and like an arrow released from a bow, it attacked Liang Shi. Liang Shi was suddenly stunned. His eyes suddenly widened, and the fear in his heart magnified infinitely. He wanted to attack again, but it was already too late. Ah! In the next moment, a miserable howl was heard. Liang Shi's figure was directly sent flying. While he was still in the air, his body trembled, and several sword chi spurted out. The yuan meridians in his body were directly shattered. This sudden scene caused everyone to be stunned. Countless pairs of eyes became dull, not daring to believe the scene in front of them. One sword. Just one sword, and Emoihan directly crippled Liang Shi, who had won 19 consecutive battles. One had to know that Liang Shi had just used the power of his bloodline, but he still couldn't block Emoihan's sword. Emoihan was too terrifying. Emoihan's figure stood in the air, and a strange light flickered in her eyes. She looked at Liang Shi and said indifferently, "You've lost." Liang Shi lay on the ground like a pile of mud. He struggled to get up, but he couldn't do it at all. In the end, Liang Shi was still carried out of the arena. "I didn't expect Emoihan to be so ruthless." Nie Tian looked at Emoihan, and the corner of his mouth could not help but twitch as he murmured. Emoihan looked very gentle, giving off a kind feeling. It was unexpected that she would be so decisive when she attacked, directly crippling Liang Shi. In fact, Nie Tian knew that Emoihan had already shown mercy. Given her strength, one sword strike was enough to kill Liang Shi. For some reason, Nie Tian felt that there was something about Emoihan that he couldn't see. Emoihan defeated Liang Shi in a domineering manner. The entire arena fell into a dead silence. It took a long time for the crowd to react. Next, the battles continued. Emoihan defeated Liang Shi, but she did not obtain his battle record. She had only defeated one person. She still had to defeat another 19 people before she was qualified to challenge the Ghost King Palace's Low God Arena Lord. This rule was very disadvantageous to the martial artists participating in the arena battles. Even if one was powerful, defeating 19 people in a row was not an easy task. At the very least, one would consume some of their strength, and when they faced the arena lord in the end, they would naturally be at a disadvantage. Next, there was a continuous stream of people challenging Emoihan. It turned out that many experts did not make a move just now, and were waiting for stronger people to appear. However, Emoihan's swordsmanship was too strong. Everyone who fought with her was defeated with one sword strike. Soon, Mo Ihan defeated 19 people, and there was only one person left. The last person was very crucial. As long as she defeated this person, Mo Ihan would be able to challenge the arena lord. Everyone's eyes flickered, looking forward to the appearance of this last person. Let me. At this moment, an angry roar sounded. Immediately, a figure stepped out and appeared in mid-air. However, this cultivator hadn't even stabilized his footing when a strand of sword intent suddenly whistled out, and that cultivator didn't even have the time to react before he was directly killed. What? Everyone took a deep breath in, and didn't know what had happened. Miss Mo, your swordsmanship strength is not bad. Let me have a taste of it. The next moment, a gloomy voice sounded, and immediately, a skinny figure appeared in mid-air. His cold eyes locked on Mo Ihan, full of killing intent. Chapter 1641. Mo Ihan easily defeated 19 challengers. However, the last challenger that appeared surprised Nyetian. It was Duguanai. In fact, before Duguanai appeared, someone had already appeared. However, Duguanai killed him in one move. Duguanai had appeared, and before he had even exchanged blows with Mo Ihan, he had already killed another martial artist in an instant. His tyrannical ferocity inspired fear in others. Who is he? He's so arrogant. He actually killed another person. Yes, this guy is a bit too much. It was the first person who stood out to challenge him. He's strong. Of course he dares to do so. This guy is also a swordsman. It'll be interesting to see him fight against the genius swordswoman in the arena. The crowd discussed. They had some expectations for Duguanai. It's you. Mo Ihan suddenly raised her head. When she saw the skinny figure clearly, she immediately recognized Duguanai. Miss Mo, Nyetian can protect you now, but he can't protect you forever. Floating in midair, Duguanai smiled coldly. Then, he turned to look at Nyetian, his eyes full of provocation. Nyetian looked at Duguanai and could not help but frown. It seemed that Duguanai had noticed him long ago. Even if Nyetian wanted to save Duguanai and Mo Ihan, he could not interfere in the battle. This was Guiwang City. Who knew how many high god experts were hiding in the dark? There might even be over-god experts. Mo Ihan and Duguanai's battle is going to be a disaster. Nyetian's eyes flickered as he thought to himself. It was not that he had no confidence in Mo Ihan. It was just that Duguanai's strength was a bit strange. Duguanai smiled again. Then, his body moved and landed straight down. He was like a cold sword that stood upright on the arena. Mo Ihan frowned slightly. She was slightly nervous. She had personally witnessed Duguanai's prowess and knew how strong he was. Miss Mo, there is no grudge between us. It's just that I have been entrusted by someone to kill you. Duguanai smiled coldly. His eyes were cold as he said, I don't think you will admit defeat so easily for the sake of your sister. Who sent you to kill me? Mo Ihan asked coldly. She had calmed down a lot. I can't tell you that. Duguanai laughed. Then, his face turned cold and he said, Make your move. As his cold voice faded, Duguanai's skinny body trembled. Suddenly, a wave of sword force whistled out and rushed towards Mo Ihan. When Mo Ihan sensed the powerful sword intent rushing towards her, her beautiful eyes couldn't help but tremble. After which, she slashed out with her sword as her sword intent blossomed, as a sword shadow pierced through the air. Bang! The two sword intents collided. A muffled sound resounded in the air. Mo Ihan and Duguanai retreated a few steps at the same time, increasing the distance between them. This was the first time Duguanai had made a move. He wanted to see how strong Mo Ihan was. When Duguanai entered the arena, he was suppressed by the restrictive spells. Therefore, he didn't dare to be careless. He knew that Mo Ihan was very strong. Her previous opponents didn't make her use her true strength. Mo Ihan's eyes became firm. She looked cold at Duguanai. If they were outside the arena, she certainly wouldn't be Duguanai's opponent. However, inside the arena, Duguni's strength was only at the peak of the lower god stage. This gave her a slight chance. Bang! At this time, Dugunai slashed out with his sword again. The surging sword shadow pressed down crazily. Emoihan's entire body was enveloped by a terrifying sword intent. Emoihan also stabbed out with her sword. Her speed was extremely fast, sharp and swift. Bang! In the air above the arena, there was a continuous violent collision sound. The sword shadow was wreaking havoc in the air. The crowd was shocked. They didn't expect these two people to be so strong. At this time, Nyetian slightly frowned. Dugunai didn't show his true strength. It seemed that he was playing with Emoihan. On the other hand, Emoihan was slightly strained. Soon, she couldn't hold on. Nyetian found that Emoihan's sword intent was of the wind attribute. It was very fast, but it wasn't powerful enough. It couldn't hurt Dugunai at all. Dugunai is so slow. Is he waiting for someone? Nyetian frowned and wondered. Dugunai could have defeated or even killed Emoihan quickly. However, he didn't kill her. It seemed that he was waiting for someone. Miss Mo, if you don't use your sword seal, you will be in danger. Duguni's figure stood in the air. He suddenly smiled sinisterly. When Nyetian heard Duguni's words, he couldn't help but frown. He was puzzled because he didn't feel any sword seal's aura from Emoihan. Demonic void 100 forms, 1 strike. At this time, Duguni's figure moved. The demonic void 100 forms in his hand released billowing demonic void chi. A dark sword shadow appeared and rushed towards Emoihan. In this sword, Dugunai used a bit of his real strength. It was a fatal threat to Emoihan. Emoihan felt a murderous aura. Her beautiful eyes flickered. It seemed that she was hesitating. But in an instant, her hesitant eyes suddenly became firm. She growled, "You forced me to do this." The angry growl resounded in the space. It seemed a bit sharp. The next moment, Emoihan's body suddenly released a powerful sword intent. It was as if there was a huge sea of sword intent in her body that suddenly burst. The billowing sword intent was like a stormy sea. Emoihan's long hair fluttered in the air. Her delicate face became a bit ferocious, as if she was going to be possessed. Seeing this scene, the crowd couldn't help but gasp. They were shocked by the sword intent that Emoihan suddenly released. Nyetian's pupils suddenly shrank. He couldn't help but change his expression. The sword intent that was released from Emoihan's body was very violent. It also contained a kind of extremely evil power. It was extremely terrifying. Evil flowing sword seal. At the same time, Fat Cat's voice suddenly sounded. She was very surprised and her fat body trembled. Nyetian was also stunned. He didn't know what evil flowing sword seal was. How could it make Fat Cat so surprised? Boom! At this time, there was a sudden explosion in the arena. Then, endless sword intent surged out and actually forced Dugunai to step back. Emoihan stood in the air. Sword intent surged around her. Her long hair flew wildly. She seemed to have fallen into an inexplicable kind of madness. Evil flowing sword seal, finally forced out. Dugunai steadied his body. He smiled playfully and said, "I really want to see how strong evil flowing sword seal, one of the 3 ancient sword seals, is." Evil flowing sword seal is released. There is only one ending for you, death. Emoihan's pair of beautiful eyes became cold. Even her voice became bone-chilling, filled with sharp killing intent. Since Dugunai forced her to use evil flowing sword seal, she must kill the strong one. 3 ancient sword seals? Hearing Duguni's words, Nyetian couldn't help but frown. He had never heard of the 3 ancient sword seals.